ridiculous. The posts were short, random, sometimes even funny. But the longer I read, the darker it became. The people posting here weren't laughing. They were terrified. And the deeper I dug, the darker things became. From people losing trust in their own minds to addicts that are spiraling into degeneracy. Today, we're diving into some unhinged Reddit rabbit holes. And make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let's get into it. Call of the Void. Every downward spiral starts somewhere. Oddly enough, this one starts more than 100 years ago. The same way most things do. With a problem. That problem belonged to a Japanese doctor called Nagai Nagayoshi. He was a renowned pharmacologist and chemist, and in 1893, he began studying ancient East Asian medicines, trying to learn what modern or enhanced applications they might provide. Specifically, he wanted to learn about a plant called mahuang, which was traditionally steeped into a tea and used to treat conditions like asthma and the common cold. Dr. Nagayoshi wanted to know why it worked. What chemical was activated when the plant was steeped? So after some time and some experimentation, he managed to isolate a brand new, undiscovered chemical, ephedrine. Ephedrine is a nervous system stimulant and vascular dilator. Basically, it makes a person go into fight or flight when consumed. The chemical has been used to save people from low blood pressure, especially during surgeries. This drug alone has saved millions upon millions of lives. But when chemists discover a helpful chemical, they rarely stop there. They ask, can we make it stronger? Last longer? Can we save more lives? And so Dr. Nagayoshi continued his work, eventually creating one of the most notorious and destructive drugs of all time. We've called it Breaking Bad Crystal in the past, but for the purposes of this story, I'll call it M. Popularized in World War II, when soldiers were given prescriptions to help them fight longer and harder, M is more prevalent today than it ever was. Its use in an epidemic that has, over the past 80 years, chewed up large populations of the US, crippled an already struggling lower class, and is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. Today, about 33% of homeless people use M regularly, the most commonly used substance among that population, and about 6% of people report having tried it in their lives. In the US, that's 21 million people, and that's just today. Needless to say, M has become a multinational issue, and its ramifications are impossible to dismiss. But with all that said, how do people find themselves getting addicted more than 100 years after its creation? Seeing all the damage it's caused, what's the appeal? Well, we need to go no further than Reddit to answer that question, because I discovered a user who not only became addicted to M, but actually wanted to. The user writes, "Where can I find a group of kind-hearted, unselfish, humorous, somewhat intelligent M addicts who, most importantly, are fully in possession of a decent moral compass? I'm a 40-year-old female, born and raised in a beach suburb of LA, who loves to do almost all drugs recreationally but has, out of choice, become reliant on slamming M daily. The reason I'm doing it is because I have severe epilepsy that forces me to take downers in order to stay alive, and those pills make me so tired. They had me in a constant daze and stuck in bed 18 to 20 hours per day for years, unable to live any sort of life, until someone introduced me to slamming M. I also have ADHD, so I'm not sure I've ever actually felt high the way others describe it from M, except maybe from like 30 minutes after a really strong shot, and I haven't felt that rush since like the first month I did it. I'd say M just makes me feel like how I would feel if I were a normal person. When you are with someone who takes M daily, and if you want to be open about who you are, then groups of M addicts are really the only people you can hang out with without being judged, shunned, or possibly reported to the police for possessing illegal narcotics. My problem is that I am yet to find a group of people who do M but are still fully trustworthy. What is it about doing M that takes away people's ability to do others as you would like them to do to you? Why does stealing from others seem to suddenly not be something that just feels innately wrong when one is doing M? Why, when someone has enough energy to sit and try to figure out how to unlock a bike for 5 hours straight, do they not have the ability to put that time and effort towards doing something to make themselves a legal income? Why does M seem to cause a collapse of general morals for the average user? I do not understand and would honestly just like someone to explain to me. I would also really love if anyone could tell me if I will ever be able to find other people like me who I can be myself around, but not have to constantly watch my back. Does that even exist anywhere out there? Thank you to anyone who has actually taken the time to read this and is willing to shed some light on anything for me. I will be forever grateful. I'm gonna be completely honest. I've never seen a post quite like this, so I'll be delicate in the way I talk about it. This woman is an addict, a chosen addict, using one of the most powerful illegal drugs on the market today to curb her other medication side effects. And she's asking the internet to help her find trustworthy addicts. There's a lot to unpack here. The story she writes honestly reminds me of another user, Spontaneous H. If you don't know who that is, Spontaneous H was someone that used to post on Reddit who, for various reasons, decided to try Hard H as a sort of experiment, a test of self-will and self-control. He believed he would beat the game. That's how he talked about it, at least at first. You see, Spontaneous H eventually got sober, and congratulations to him, because that's huge. And he went back to Reddit to discuss his earlier mindset. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but I think this quote from a later post says a lot. He writes, "I don't even remember what I said in the first post, but I know I can look back objectively and say that things probably weren't as good and normal before I tried H that time as I made it seem in that first post. There were certainly warning signs before that with alcohol, weed, and other things that I had issues with substances, although I probably couldn't admit it to myself at the time. I would have never tried it if things were truly going well for me." I hate to speculate, but I see a lot of that mindset here in this lady's post. She is suffering from epileptic seizures and is on medication that puts her out for the count most of the day. She says she's sleeping most of the day away. Now, it's perfectly reasonable to want something to keep you awake. I'm not going to minimize her issue by saying she should go get a coffee. I get this is probably more nuanced than that, but there are meds out there to help offset the effects of sleep-inducing medications. She's slamming M to stay awake. And the friends she's looking for, the ones who wouldn't rob her for another fix, they're few and far between. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. And here's one user who gives a good reason why. He writes, quote, "M damages the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that is behind judgment, impulse control, empathy, consequences, emotional regulation, etc. It is essentially the part of your brain that makes you give a F. When the damage gets bad enough, people exhibit the behavior you're describing above. The good news is that it is mostly reversible when you quit." This comment actually puts some fear into OP, and we'll get into that in a second, because we have a lot of experienced addicts and recovered addicts in the comments I'd like to discuss. But first off, let's talk about what's happening to OP mentally. There's a chemical in your brain, you may have heard of it, called dopamine. It's your brain's way of rewarding you. It's the feel-good chemical. When you eat some chocolate or go for a run, what do you get? Dopamine. And the way that it's measured in your brain is by units. Units of dopamine. Now, your baseline level of dopamine sits around 100 units. That's what you feel doing nothing. It's your reward for being alive, I guess. Now, you eat some good food, that'll get you 150 units of dopamine. You play video games, work out, have intimate time with your partner, that'll get you around 200 units of dopamine. That is the highest level of natural dopamine you can achieve. But as we look at different narcotics and their effect on dopamine release, we can see why M is so dangerous and corrosive to the mind. Slamming M, as OP calls it, releases roughly 1,300 units of dopamine. And that's not all. There is not one single drug that creates a bigger release of dopamine. Not one. So someone struggling with an M addiction isn't just battling with some rudimentary moral dilemma. They are actively fighting the strongest dopamine hit known to modern man. Most people get desperate for food when they don't eat breakfast. They don't last a couple hours without behavioral changes, anger, frustration, desperation, strong cravings. Now try that times 10. And OP is slamming it by choice, one of the most powerful stimulants on planet Earth to stay awake. And rightly, she starts getting worried about her own morals. She writes, "Thank you guys for your insight. Do you have any idea if my morals could just suddenly slip away out of the blue on a dime? I'm afraid of just waking up one day to that happening without any warning. It's been over 5 years and I've stayed the same. I know that because I have an even closer relationship with my parents and whole family, just due to me living in close quarters with them this whole time since it's always been strong. But the only issue we really ever had was they never really loved my husband, who was temperamental ever since I met him at 15 and caused me to be on edge a lot, which they were quite aware of and didn't like. I also am worried about my teeth, which my parents spent hard-earned money putting in braces, and that I've never seen one cavity ever to this day, suddenly rotting out or something. I literally have nightmares that the M is going to cause me to wake up one day and my teeth are going to rot out or something." To this, another user replies, "It's never like that. Nobody wakes up their second day of using powder and decides to steal catalytic converters. Instead, someone on their 12,000th hit realizes he stole a Sawzall yesterday and decides to go Prius hunting to secure his fix. With addiction, nothing is really flipped like a switch, unless it's a relapse. You won't notice your morals just completely slip away. You'll notice them slowly being eroded. For some addicts, it takes a single bender. Others, it could be years. It really depends. But once it starts, it's usually exponentially bad as time progresses. If you've ever met anyone struggling with addiction, you know this is true. Good people do bad things for that 1300 dopamine hit. It happens every day, by the tens of thousands all across the world. Morality seems like a secondary issue when the high is over, and you're suffocating for more. And deeper into the comments, we get a recovered addict sharing their own experience with OP. And it really does just say everything. The user writes, "Hi, I'm a recovering powder and H addict. Although our drugs of choice don't matter, it's all the same. I started with pain pills, and that road led me to using H every day. For a long time, I looked like I had it together. I was functioning. I worked for the mayor of my town while doing lines off his desk when alone. I worked in law firms and accounting offices, straight A student, college scholarship. On paper, I was doing everything right. But inside, I was trying to fix something I didn't understand. Because of all my medical issues, using made me feel normal. They gave me energy. They made me feel like I could show up to my life, like I could do the things everyone else seemed to do so effortlessly. I didn't realize I was self-medicating depression, anxiety, and a whole list of things I didn't even have names for yet. At first, it felt like it made it better. It made me more open, more loving, more connected. I felt closer to people, more emotionally available. The constant self-criticism quieted down. The anxiety faded. The depression lifted. For the first time, I felt at peace. I felt like I could live as the version of myself I always thought I was supposed to be, the best version of me. And I did enjoy everything, until I didn't. It didn't happen overnight, but it did start with an IV. I made rules. Never more than 3 days in a row. Never more than a certain amount. Never more than a certain number of times a day. When I started, I had a list of nevers, but that list was always progressing. I would never buy from someone I didn't know or trust. To, I'll never get arrested. I would never use H. I will never do anything to jeopardize my family finding out. I would never use an IV. I would never use a dirty IV. I would never not be in control or not be able to stop. I'll never lose my job or drop out of college. I would never become a real addict. I would never let my use affect my health. I would never get a heart infection. I would never get an STI. I would never steal. I would never spiral. I would never sell myself for another hit. I would never hit rock bottom. I would never die from using it. I would never die from using it a second time. I'll never be a statistic. I would never hit a lower bottom. I built a structure around chaos and called it control, but I never had control, not from day one. And here's the truth nobody tells you. A list of nevers is a fallacy. It's not a list of things you'll never do, it's a list of things you haven't done yet. And one by one, I hit every single one of them. And for quite a while, I still held it together. I was still functioning, still excelling, still convincing myself I was different. Until I wasn't. I thought I had control. I didn't. It was an illusion from the very beginning. Now, OP comments under this reply with a couple of excuses as to why she's different. She has epilepsy. She needs it. She uses it differently, etc. She claims, like every addict claims, that she needs to use the most powerful drug on earth. And I would normally read that comment, but the user who made the comment we just read makes another comment, diving deeper into the mindset of a career addict. I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's very long, but here's the short version. It reads, "For years, I told myself I wasn't an addict because my life didn't look destroyed, because I was still showing up, still performing, still passing. My use crept up slowly. More money, more time, more risk. I started surrounding myself with people who used it because I needed access. What started as weekends turned into midweek drives, then daily, then multiple times a day. What used to last a weekend was gone in hours. After a long time of maintaining, I needed more and more, just trying to feel normal. Then I needed it just to not be sick. Then came withdrawal. If you've never felt it, it's hard to explain. It feels like dying. Your body revolts, your mind collapses, every cell in you is screaming. I knew logically I wouldn't die from the booger sugar and H withdrawal. But it didn't matter. It felt like death, and I couldn't take it. That's when I crossed a major never. Stealing. I pawned my mother's jewelry piece by piece. I started with the jewelry. I bought her as gifts over the years, thinking it felt less severe because I bought it for her, even though it still hurt. When all that was gone, I started pounding the rest of her jewelry, but said I would never sell her wedding ring. When everything else was gone, I sold the wedding ring. But I always told myself that one thing I would never sell was my father's ring. He had passed away 3 years prior. and it was the most prized possession for both my mother and I in our entire existence. I told myself no matter what, I would never touch that. And in desperation, I sold that too. I didn't want to, but I wasn't behind the wheel anymore. Addiction had full control of the wheel and was now driving. It broke something inside me. It wasn't a lack of morals. I didn't like myself for it. But in those moments, it felt like there were only two options: do this or die. When you're on the edge of the cliff and a hand reaches out to you, you don't stop to ask if it belongs to the devil. You just grab it. That's addiction. I'll never forget the moment it hit me. It was before I started stealing and thought I was still in control. I was driving to pick up, and for the first time, I knew I didn't want to use anymore. I told myself, get off at that next exit, turn around, go home, but I didn't. Exit after exit passed me by. I was screaming in my car, crying, begging myself to stop, begging God to give me the strength to turn the wheel, and I couldn't. That was the moment I understood what people in recovery mean when they say using against your will. I didn't want to use. I knew what it was doing to me, and I still couldn't stop. That's when I knew I was no longer in the driver's seat. From there, things unraveled fast. I couldn't keep a job. Everyone knew, even when I wouldn't admit it. I hit rock bottom, and then found out there was always a lower bottom waiting. Jobless, homeless, stealing, doing things I never thought I would do just to survive the next few hours. And eventually, I went through my whole list of nevers. We like to think our path is unique. You will read this and find all the ways you don't identify, instead of seeing the commonalities. In recovery, we call that being terminally unique. Your disease is trying to convince you can't relate to me or my story, but you are different, but you're not an addict. But these things won't happen to you. You'll be better. You'll be careful. You'll be different. But the truth is, our stories are all different variations, but our endings are not. The path is already predetermined and laid out. The only choice you really have is whether you stay on it to your untimely death or step off. Because there are only two outcomes. You keep going and it takes everything from you, or you get out and fight for your life. There is no middle ground. OP never replies to this comment, and I think that's telling. I think the two perspectives are really important when talking about this story. It's almost like seeing the future unravel in front of you, a prediction of the pain and loss to come, and the current sufferer still thinking they have control. From searching her profile, she's been using a different stimulant, prescription Adderall, for about 15 years. It's in the same family as M, so needless to say, she's been abusing both legal and illegal drugs for a while. And as of today, 2 months after her original post, it looks like she is still using M regularly. I fear that, like many stories of addiction, including spontaneous H, this user won't stop today. Probably not tomorrow either. But perhaps the helpful commenters will crack the delusion she's living in. But for now, she's looking for friends like her, addicts with morality. I hope for her sake, and I mean this kindly, that she doesn't find any. Instead, I hope she finds the help she deserves, because no one deserves to suffer. I'm losing my mind. Intrusive thoughts are something we all deal with. We all know the feeling when someone is walking ahead of you very slowly and you're in a rush, and some lizard-brained part of yourself is saying, God, if I could only curse this guy out right here, right now. But you stop yourself and say, what am I thinking right now? I'm an adult. I would never do that. and you swallow the thoughts and move on with your day. Or you're dealing with an annoying customer at work. They ask for help one too many times and suddenly you catch yourself thinking, I hope they trip and fall out of the door. In fact, I hope when they get up, they fall again into a bus with bad brakes. And you stop yourself and think, whoa, where did that thought come from? Or when you're dealing with that one friend who you know is only a friend and today they're wearing something beautiful and they make you laugh for the 1000th time and suddenly the words, want to go on a date, are on the tip of your tongue, heavy like lead. These aren't worries. They aren't daydreams. They aren't a measure of morality. They are intrusive thoughts. And for most of us, they are a completely normal part of living. According to a 2014 study, 94% of people reported experiencing at least one intrusive thought within the past 3 months. They are categorically unwanted and uncontrollable, sometimes being violent, or embarrassing, gross, or disturbing, but more or less totally normal. And for most of us, they are a brief disturbance in our lives, and we can let it pass. And an emphasis on most of us. On r/intrusive thoughts, we find many users who are wrestling with this very common issue. Some of the posts are silly, like user Bird Iena, who writes, I'm really thirsty. I should drink the pool water. And that's honestly pretty funny. I'm sure many people have had this same thought, and the comments reflect it. But some are more debilitating, graphic, and downright disturbing. That same user, Birdiana, writes, I could just murder my entire family in their sleep. And the comments reflect it. And this is a pattern we see across the entire subreddit. A violent image passes through someone's mind, and while most would dismiss it, others become obsessive. One user says, I constantly think about killing people, whether it is strangers or family. No one is safe. There is no malice. They just appear. Another user says, I should invite a stranger around my house, murder them, and tell the police I came downstairs to find a stranger with a knife. And another says, I could probably force myself on that girl that lied about being attacked and get away with it. Those posts aren't particularly detailed, but this next one is, and there's a reason I want to talk about it. It reads, warning for heavily violent and psycho stuff. I feel terrible for some of the things I think in my head, but I've never acted on the bad ones. Never. I have thought of hurting people and cutting animals to pieces and taking them apart like I do electronics, of digging my hands inside them and feeling around for their organs. I have thought about torturing people, things like flaying and passing hot metal over what's underneath, carving words into somebody. I've thought about using my bare hand to pull someone apart, of putting my hand in their torso and just pulling out whatever I can hold. I have thought about just watching the light leave their eyes as I calmly kill somebody. I don't like them, but they don't disturb me either. These things have never really disturbed me, so when I think about these things, I feel bad and wrong, but not turned away. I want to say I would never, but I think if I felt someone deserved it, I would. But it would have to be a serious crime against someone I love. I feel like a psycho because this can't be normal, other than a feeling of being a bad person, which I have all the time regardless of intrusive thoughts. I'm not disgusted. If anything, I'm somewhat fascinated by the things I think. I know they're sickening thoughts. I know that things like that would be seen as twisted and psychotic by others. But to me, it's just a thought I have. They have no bearing on my actions, so I pay them no mind unless I'm already in a bad place mentally at the time. Then I self-loathe. And the reason I wanted to talk about this post is because it is titled, "Am I a Bad Person?" A very good question. And as we begin to explore r/intrusive thoughts and the users who frequently post there, we do see some downright disturbing content. Like this post that reads, "I keep on having terrible thoughts of doing disgusting, vile things to my friend, and I think it might be causing me to lose it. I keep on having intrusive thoughts about kidnapping my best friend and doing experiments on her, forcing her to be intimate against her will with dogs, doing it all myself, etc. And I feel terrible for having these thoughts, like anyone would. My parents won't let me get help no matter how much I ask. It's gotten to the point that I have to actively stop myself from doing it some days, and on some days I literally lose the ability to control my body and I try to walk to her house. I usually snap out of it within an hour or two, which is good because that's less time than it would take for me to actually do anything. But it's still a major issue because I usually end up snapping out of it in random spots around the route to her house. It scares me." Now this is a super horrifying post, and there are many stories just like this. Violent, morbid thoughts, disgusting urges to do the inhumane, and some of them are written so casually, it's just jarring. But another line I think is important there. It scares me. Now, just to clarify, I am not standing on a soapbox defending some guy wanting to violate and murder his friend. That is not my stance here. But that one line, "I'm scared," is a common through line I see across the entire community of r/intrusive thoughts. This user, like many others, is not waiting idly while his dark desires pour in uncontrollably. He wants help. He can't get it. And bottom line, he is scared of himself. And this is where intrusive thoughts have the capacity to destroy lives. Not just the individual, but those around them. It's a common pattern I see across the thread. They begin to question it. Why did I think that? Does that mean I wanted to do it? Am I a bad person? And before long, a series of unwanted thoughts becomes a days-long spiral of fear, guilt, and self-doubt. Not because they want to do these things, but because the thoughts feel so vivid, so convincing, that they begin to lose trust in themselves. And for the mentally ill, this is a troublesome place to end up because if they aren't in control of these dark thoughts, what happens next? One user, who is a frequent poster on r/intrusive thoughts, switches over to r/venting, where he describes his own experiences and struggles with crippling, demented, intrusive thoughts. He writes the following, edited for decency. "Intrusive thoughts or my deepest desires? I do not know anymore. I think I've always been a weirdo, or at least a deviant even since I was a kid. Example, using deviant art at the ripe age of 8, with random flare-ups of my issues that I could at least kinda cope with. Lately though, it's just been terrible to deal with. I fixate and obsess on my thoughts for hours. I've noticed that they get worse when I'm angry. I get mad. I think about hurting people and can't stop thinking about guts. I can't keep handling the violent thoughts and urges that get so intense I have to hit myself to prevent hurting someone else. I cannot do it anymore. I have no one to talk to. My mom will either laugh at me or get disgusted. My siblings are no better. My therapist left me, etc. And why would I willingly tell my friends or anyone I know? I would be left in seconds. This is really my life. This is my sad, sad life. In the flesh. I'm living it. It's not fake. It's not a nightmare I'll wake up from. It's real. It's not a haha funny joke. I'm actually mentally ill. My brain just continues to rot and I can't get help. It's like watching my life just slowly melt away. Usually when I get this way, I just rewatch Fight Club or wait it out, but nothing's really helping. I get angered so easily lately, I just think about hurting everyone around me. The tension and the frustration have gotten so bad, I've started to do some extreme things to myself again. But even that doesn't help. To think that maybe I wouldn't be this way had I been born neurotypical and loved a little more as a child. I think this user's candor makes something very clear. For those suffering from these intrusive thoughts, the thoughts are just as unwelcome to them as they are jarring for us. And he's not alone. His story is reflected in many other posts in r/intrusive thoughts. Stories of guilt, of shame, and the inability to stop thinking those things. But I'm here to tell you, look, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist or anything, and this is not medical advice. But in my opinion, these people aren't calloused or sociopathic. The vast majority of them en masse are visibly and vocally suffering with a crisis of morality. It's a cognitive dissonance between the darkest thoughts imaginable and an empathetic person being crushed by the weight of their own mind. Sociopaths don't have that. They don't have empathy or a conscious concern for their own actions or thoughts. So what's actually going on here? Normal, healthy people aren't dealing with this many disturbing thoughts in a day, and if they are, they're certainly and observably in control. So what makes the users on r/intrusive thoughts any different? Well, intrusive thoughts are a common symptom of multiple mental disorders, which weaken the brain's ability to regulate disturbing thoughts. One of the most well-known is obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Now, when most people hear OCD, they picture someone obsessively cleaning their house, lining up pencils, washing their hands. Howie Mandel and his germophobia is a good example. But the truth about OCD is, it isn't just about being clean or being organized. It's about undeniable compulsion and doubt. Relentless, suffocating doubt. Unlike most people, someone suffering from a mental illness like OCD can't dismiss their intrusive thoughts. Their brain treats the thought like an emergency. Did I lock the front door? If I didn't, the house will get broken into. So I better check the door again. And is the stove still on? Because if it is, the house might burn down, so I better check the stove again. And when they have disturbing thoughts of doing something extreme to themselves or others, violent, angry, malicious thoughts, that doubt starts to creep in. Hard. What if I really want to do that? What if that says something terrible about me? What if I am dangerous? Am I a monster? And so begins a cycle of reassurance seeking, researching, avoiding, and mentally reviewing every detail of their lives. And the more they obsess over the compulsion, the deeper rooted the compulsion becomes, until their life is entirely consumed by the thought. And the cognitive dissonance these people experience at the crossroads of morality versus intrusive thinking sends them into a very dark, very painful place. User Onyx the Dutch Angel writes, "Intrusive thoughts are ruining my life. I've never made a post here, let alone use this site often, but I guess I just need to write this down somewhere. I've been dealing with two thoughts, one more than a year. I believe the other a few months. Nothing is working and I feel like I'm going insane. I'm constantly terrified of them and I have to constantly distract myself or they creep in and it's near impossible to get them to be quiet. They have destroyed my sleep schedule. I've been having to stay up very, very late, upwards of 4 a.m. just watching YouTube or playing games until I literally pass out. It's caused me to stress eat, and I'm scared to go outside as there are things which can trigger these thoughts. I used to be skinny, but now I've gained weight, and I hate how I look, but I can't fix that. When I try to fix these, it feels like as I deserve this, like these thoughts are truly me. But that can't be real. I will never accept that, but it still hurts just the same. It ruined many things, and even 2 good job possibilities. I don't know what to do. I've asked for help, and I have not received any. I don't want to die, and I don't plan on committing S-word, but this is unbearable. It's unfair. All I ever wanted to do was help people. Hell, I wanted to be a firefighter. Now I'm too scared to even go outside. Now, I think it's important to say this isn't just an OCD thing. We see the same characteristics of debilitating intrusive thoughts in many mental disorders. People with PTSD, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and many more have symptomatic intrusive thoughts listed as a side effect. Now, just to make this abundantly clear, this entry is not me villainizing the mentally ill or those struggling with disorders or compulsions. People with OCD are not monsters because they have OCD. They have no control over that. And the thoughts themselves don't make anyone a bad person. If thinking about criminal behavior and disturbing actions was a crime, I'm a YouTuber who covers the worst crimes imaginable. I'd be guilty too. The horror of these posts, in my opinion, is watching someone lose a very long battle with their own mind. These horrifying thoughts are scary enough on their own, reading it on a Reddit page. Now, imagine that happening in your own head all day, every day, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. That's a fresh hell I can't even begin to imagine. We all know what it's like to feel guilty, to feel ashamed or scared or overwhelmed. And when those hard emotions come, you always have someone to lean on no matter what. Someone you can trust, and that person is yourself. But for those struggling with debilitating intrusive thoughts, yourself becomes the enemy. When the burden becomes too great and you don't know how to make it out, who can you trust if not yourself? Well, in this next Reddit post, we find out. The user writes, "My intrusive thoughts have made me want to commit S-word. I have OCD, and one of my worst symptoms is intrusive thoughts. For the past week, I've gotten them nonstop, and I can't focus on anything else. They disgust me and make me feel like a horrible person. I know logically that they're just thoughts, and me feeling disgusted by them means I don't actually want to do the things I'm thinking of. But it's exhausting. It's gotten worse within the past few years, and it's pushed me to the point where I just want to commit S-word. I don't have any plans since I'm scared of death, but even that fear is dwindling. And I'm worried I might try to commit S-word in the near future if things don't change. The only problem is I have no idea how to change things. I don't know if I'm asking for advice or reassurance, or maybe even someone dealing with something similar, but I just needed to talk about it." This user is tired of carrying the weight of their intrusive thoughts on their shoulders, and they're exhausted. So, if they can't rely on themselves, who can they rely on? Well, I will let this commenter answer that question. OP, let's talk. The world is so messy right now. You're not alone. You're probably in a large group slowly becoming the majority. I fully empathize with you. Things are hard. I think often the same things you are mentioning. Let's chat and see if we can't figure this out together. In almost every single post, we see the same thing. People helping each other. I know it's hard, but you don't have to die. There are medications and therapies out there that can help you. I have PTSD, depression, and anxiety. There was a time when I was a lot like you, just waiting to pass away. You just have to be persistent. I believe in you. When I first went through r/intrusive thoughts, I was honestly horrified, I can't lie. Reading the stories of people my age, conjuring up thoughts that are beyond disturbing. Some of them are unimaginably cruel or sadistic. And come to find out, these people are suffering through a mental illness they can't control. Swallowed up by those same disturbing thoughts, crippled by them, with a chronic distrust for themselves, their judgment, and their minds. Well, it's heartbreaking. But the truth is, as we've seen, nobody has to suffer alone. And although some of these posts are honestly downright terrifying, it is refreshing to cover a story where people are being genuinely helpful and kind, and trying to be available for individuals who are suffering. The world is a dark place, guys. I should know. I spend the majority of my day reading and writing stories about it, but for all of the evil, disturbing people I write about, there are just as many good, kind, loving people in this world. That's the truth. So, to those of you at home who are suffering, remember, you are never alone. And if right now you're not strong enough to brave this unfair and horrible world by yourself, we, your friends, your family, your community, we will always be here to help. I didn't know when I started writing this video that it was going to turn so mental health heavy, but as I'm wrapping this up, I think these issues are important to talk about. Between the two stories we just read, there are hundreds of thousands of sufferers who fall into one of these categories: addiction, mental illness, thoughts of committing S-word. And you know, I have a platform now, so I want to provide some resources for you or for anyone you know who's struggling with any of these issues. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And this is Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. 10 unspeakable true scary stories, and like the title says, these will all be true stories, so that makes them even more scary, and I hope you enjoy, and thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you all watching, and before we get into the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It's the channel's goal to be at 500,000 subscribers, so please subscribe to the channel. Helps out a ton, and yeah, like I said, thanks for being here, and without further ado, let's get into 10 unspeakable true scary stories. How's your dad? I saw him yesterday. My dad was out of town for months. Back when I was 12, I went to a private school, so I needed to take a long walk to my apartment. Since the school was a bit far from the city center, this was in Zagreb, Croatia, so I had a lot of public transport options to get home. My usual routine was to get on the bus at the station in front of my school all the way down to the main street, then take a tram to a public park and walk home the rest of the way. Our school had a double timetable where 1 week we went to school in the morning and the other week we had classes in the afternoon. This happened during one of my afternoon weeks. I was walking out with a few classmates since we all got on the same bus to the main street. The rest of my classmates were picked up by their parents. When we got in the bus, there were a few empty seats, so I took a seat in front of a balding middle-aged man who was wearing slightly dirty clothes. That was my mistake. As soon as I sat down, he started staring at me. Like staring, with a cold look in his eyes. Feeling uncomfortable, I took a book out of my bag and started reading. I would have used my phone if I could, but it was dead since I forgot to charge it before I left the house that day. The guy did not stop staring at me the whole bus ride, to the point where I couldn't even concentrate on my book, but I refused to put it down because I was scared. I would have mentioned something to my classmates, but we were all spread out on the bus, but I was too scared to move. I don't know why, but I didn't want him to see that I was scared, thinking that maybe that would deter him, or maybe I thought he was just staring at me for some stupid reason. When we finally got to our stop, my classmates and I all got off, and some of us headed to the tram station, while the others walked away to their houses. The guy who was staring at me also got off with us, and he started trailing us while keeping a fair distance. I told one of my friends about this, but urged him not to look back, thinking ignoring him would be the best option. When we got to the station, different people got on different trams, since each of them had a different route. I needed to take the tram number 2, and so did my friend. We waited for it to arrive, and the guy was somewhere to our right, but we refused to look at him. When our tram arrived, my friend and I got on, but so did the creepy guy. When I arrived at my stop, I tried to quietly discuss with my friend if getting off with me just in case was a good idea. But then we saw the guy get off himself first and start heading into the park, opposite of where I needed to go. He probably overheard us talking since there were barely any people in the tram at the time. It was around 9 p.m., but I didn't think of that, so I thought it had all been a misunderstanding. When I got off and the tram had sped away to the next station, I started walking home. It was a short distance and would have taken me about 5 minutes, but then I noticed someone following me. I immediately knew it was the same guy again, so I picked up my pace and walked to my apartment. As I turned a corner into the alley that housed my apartment, the guy was getting closer. I got to the building and buzzed my mom on the intercom. I wish she would have hurried up, but in the end, the guy managed to catch up with me. I could smell the stench coming off of him as he started talking. "Hey, how've you been, buddy? I saw your dad yesterday and he told me all about how you were getting on in that new school of yours," he said. And then I immediately knew that he was lying, since my dad had been away on work-related business for months and hadn't returned home in that time once. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there quietly staring at him. Just then, the door buzzed and unlocked, so I bolted for it. I managed to rush in and start running up the stairs, but he was falling behind me, running himself. Never in my life have I felt such an adrenaline rush as I ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor. And I had a backpack with books weighing me down, so I had a disadvantage. But in the end, I managed to arrive at the door, where my mom was happily waiting for me. With no warning, I shoved her away from the door as I entered before slamming it shut. Fortunately, the guy had enough common sense not to continue chasing after me. I told my mom what happened and she called the police, and they arrived sometime later, questioning me on how that guy looked and what exactly happened. In the end, they looked at the camera footage, but since it was so dark out and I didn't turn the indoor building lights as I entered, they weren't able to get a clear view of his face. For 2 weeks, I was too scared to go home alone, so my mom picked me up every time until 2 weeks later, when on the news it was said how a man was arrested for attempted kidnapping and R-wording of children, and the face they showed was the exact one I saw that night. So I finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing I was safe now. But that didn't excuse the fact that I was careless with not charging my phone, and there were still many bad people out there. Everyone, please stay safe out there. To the person who I met, if you ever get released for some ungodly reason, I hope I never see your face again. Scary childhood story with me and my sister. I might have been around 11 at the time, and it was only my sister and I still living at home by then. My dad worked overnight a lot, and that night it was just us in the house. I remember it was very dark, so maybe we had went to bed less than an hour before this happened. All of a sudden, I heard someone ruffling what sounded like Christmas wrapping paper or loud plastic, maybe even tinfoil. You could hear the way they were going through it and tearing it, etc. Then I heard my sister call out my name from her room across the hall and shout, "Stop." She sounded angry, and I remember exactly what I felt and thought when I replied. I yelled back, "That's not me." Literally, as I was completing my reply, a flood of fear and confusion went through my mind. I knew my sister, and the anger I heard in her voice was because it was scaring her too, even though she probably did think it was me. So once I said it wasn't me, I could feel the intense increase in fear that we both felt. It was very scary, and it stopped as soon as we started talking about it. My sister had another scary story from around that time, give or take a few years. She was reading a book in the living room while I was outside playing, and she would hear someone tapping on the wall, and every time she looked up to see what it was, the tapping stopped. I don't remember us ever talking about that night again, but for a period of time after that, I requested to sleep in her bed because I was scared. The time a raging customer stalked me in his truck. I, 24F, at the time was 21 female. I lived in a larger small city in the Midwest. At the time, I had no car, a bicycle, and hardly enough money for the public buses. I worked at a retail battery, lighting, and repair store. I worked full-time and only lived a little over a mile from my job. Since I was a female in a male-dominated field, I was often used to targeted abuse from men that thought they knew better. Many times I stood my ground and flaunted my knowledge in subjects that these men couldn't grasp. Because of my willingness to learn and my close proximity to work, I often worked all sorts of hours, mostly by myself. This time I wasn't the person closing and had a coworker, Joey, who was 22, who came in for a part-time shift after he wrapped up classes at the local college. We had a close friendship, and we often stood up for each other and stood in when we were flustered or needed to go to the bathroom in the back. Joey received a phone call for a possible repair on a smartphone, possibly LG low-tier phone though, and he wasn't 100% sure if it was a phone that we could repair. He asked the young female caller to stop by for a consult. She had quickly agreed and said that she would stop by at around 5:30 p.m. This was a night that I was supposed to get done at 6 p.m. and catch the bus at 6:12. It was a windy, drizzly, early fall night. I remember this because I had my bike with, and it became my anchor that night. A little before 6 p.m., this frantic, terrified, bawling 19 to 20-something-year-old woman came into our tiny shop. I was at the counter, switching out aging price tags and general store maintenance. I looked up at her, confused and willing to help. She looked me deep in the eyes, asking if Joey was here. At the time, he was pooping in our tiny bathroom in the back, so I had to step in and help out any customers. I told her that he was currently busy and that I was willing to help her. She handed me her smashed, cheap phone very timidly. My customer service skills couldn't prepare me for what she was going to say next. She quietly told me that her boyfriend, who was out in his red mini truck in the small front parking lot, had gotten angry and smashed her phone when she tried to call her sister that afternoon. I took the backing off the phone and tried to research the model for any possible screen repair. No results found. I tried to hand her back the destroyed phone, and she pushed it back in my hands with a pleading look. Then the honking commenced. There was this slight drizzle outside, so our front glass door was covered in beaded drops and was slightly fogged over. I couldn't see who was honking out there. I told her again that I couldn't help and for her to try her cell phone repair competitor down the road. The tears started to really flow down her cheeks, and I was freaked out at this point. She kept throwing glances behind her, and the honking would not stop. I shook with fear and rage at this point. I myself was in a domestic abuse situation at the time and knew what this girl was experiencing. I broke my locked stare at her and tried to look in our system a second time for a replacement screen. Nothing again. I looked up from our computer and saw a shadowy figure of a young man pacing in front of the store. I was just happy that the honking stopped, but I was increasingly shooken up. My whole body vibrated with fear, and I whispered across the counter if she needed me to call 911. She slammed her hands down on the counter and said that I couldn't do that. She begged me not to. At this point, Joey came out from the back and asked me what all the honking was from. We had a lot of elderly farmers, lazy, and disabled customers that would honk their horns for us to pick up heavy battery cores from their cars. He thought that it was one of those situations, but with the looks on our faces, he knew something horrifying was happening. The young guy stopped pacing outside and began banging on our front door. Joey took the girl's phone from my hands and said for me to go in the back and lock the back employee-only doors. I did what I was told and grabbed my bag, my bike, and my jacket. I looked at the clock in the back and it read 6:14. I spent 15 minutes with this girl, both of us feeling like trapped animals. Joey did bodybuilding during his free time and was a gentle, non-confronting, short but stocky Asian guy. I was a short, obese, kind lady that would respond either of two ways, like a doormat or ready to stand my ground. I knew that I couldn't fight a customer and neither could Joey, not because of physical reasons, we'd lose our jobs, and had no idea what to do. The young guy threw the door open, and the wind kept the door open. He had this manic, hateful look about him. A total predator he was. He was slim but muscular, early to mid-20s, and was soaked by the rain. He took the broken phone off the counter and took the girl in tow. He hurled insults at us, and I gave the girl a pitied look. He slammed the door back shut, and both Joey and I stood in absolute silence. He snapped out of it and ran to the front door and locked it. I told Joey to call our manager from our store landline and stood around while he did it. I noticed that the guy had moved his truck to directly in front of our door. He was watching us from his truck, watching us behind the counter as we were on the phone with our manager. I had to leave to get home. The last possible bus came at 6:42, and I couldn't pedal my way home in the weather and all of the circumstances that had just occurred. The time was around 6:18, and I just needed to cross the busy highway and down the sidewalk by an eighth of a mile to the nearest bus stop. Joey, the guy, and I played the waiting game. It was 6:23 when the dickhead finally left our parking lot. I told Joey that I would leave at 6:25 so I could arrive at the stop safely. Joey opened the front door, and I threw myself on top of my bike and pedaled harder than I could have ever imagined. Now, mind you, our store was in an industrial shopping area at the very edge of a town. We worked next to a sub shop and worked across from a strip mall with a bullseye store and a local chain grocery store with other retail stores and a bank all in that large lot. It started to downpour, and as I tried to pull out of our parking lot straddling my bicycle, I caught a glimpse of the red truck looping around the sub shop. The highway had dual lanes each way, and I had to play real-life Frogger if I wanted to make it to my destination in one piece. There was a few cars that slowed for me as I hauled ass to the other side of the road. I jumped off my bike and threw it on top of the curb. I promptly hopped back on and tried to pedal off. My front wheel was stuck in the grassy strip, and my right foot had slipped off into the pedal. My shins struck the pedal, and I had to act quickly. I grabbed the frame of my bike and jogged awkwardly to the bus stop. The red truck pulled into the bank parking lot, of which I had just passed. The truck pulled around and went through the entrance across from the sub shop and took the closest lane to me. He went at a crawl and turned at the red light so we could circle the main parking lot of the shopping center. There was 3 ways to get into that parking lot. One to the left, one in the center, slightly off to the right across the sub shop, and the other far to the right next to the grocery store. I stuck to the sidewalk since it felt safer and was in front of people. The truck patrolled the parking lot, the hunter stalking its prey. I felt cold, sore, and concerned, just like an injured animal. There was a couple of cars that pulled into the left entrance of the parking lot, causing the truck to stop from re-entering the lot again. I almost collapsed in the shitty small bus stop, and I felt my phone buzz. I saw that it read Joey, so I rested my bike on my person to answer the call. Joey told me that he was watching, and even though he had an elderly couple in the store that he was helping, that he wouldn't allow the guy to hurt me. I started to cry. All of this had just gotten to me. The red truck looped around once again and again. I saw the bus pull up early at 6:39, and I couldn't be happier. I knew the driver since I used the buses to get around town, errand shopping, and to get to and from work. I had my stupid fucking bike to worry about. I hung up the phone with Joey, put in my phone in my jacket pocket, and strapped down my bike in the rack that was in front of the bus. I struggled since I shook, and my bike was slick from the rain. I got on the bus and turned to open the bus doors, and saw that the truck took a left at the center entrance of the lot. I could finally let my guard down. I sat at the front of the bus, and my hands shook, had trying to get the $1.25 for the fare. The driver said that it was okay, and that I could take my time with the change. I kept my backpack on and pulled my damp phone from my pocket, dialing Joey's number, letting him know that I was fine. In under 15 minutes, I made it to my apartment safe, but deeply disturbed. I took my bike in so I wouldn't draw any attention to where I lived. All of this gave me an idea to leave my own domestic abuse situation. A few months later, when COVID took the world by storm, to this day I wonder about that girl and hope that somebody more daring and stronger than me called the cops on her abuser, that she had the strength to leave that violent man, for her to write her own story and to recover from all of that. I'm currently doing significantly better in life and finally have my own car, and I live a couple of states away safely from my past life. Even though I'm states away, and it's been 3 years now, let's not meet. Scariest person I have ever briefly met. One night, a neighbor I never talked to asked me to help him break into his house. I told him it's 1 a.m. You're being weird. He asked me if he could borrow a wrench or hammer. If I don't trust him, I can use them instead. I told him, be reasonable. It's 1 a.m. Stop acting strange. He left. 2 days later, police surrounded his house. He had murdered his father. I reported the event to the police. The murder occurred around the reported time. They were unable to figure out if he wanted to use me as an alibi. We break in and his father is already dead, or if he had a fight with his dad, broke in and murdered him. 15 years later, today I saw workers cleaning the house, which reminded me of this whole story. Over the years, the house was completely covered in vegetation. I wonder who owns the house now. It would be weird if he did. Should there be a law if you murder your dad, you can't inherit his property? Fishface, the serial stalker. This takes place over the course of a few years, from just before my university freshman year to my junior year. I am now a 20-year-old female, but at the start of the story, I was 17. For my freshman orientation, my family and I were staying at a hotel across from my college campus. Orientation started in the morning, so I wandered over to the campus with my luggage to check into my dorm room for the next few days. I was roomed alone for orientation since I have OCD and sleeping problems and didn't want to bother any potential roommates, so I put my luggage away and began walking the campus. This entire fiasco started for one reason. I wanted breakfast. It was foggy that morning, and I had never been on campus. It was a ways away from my hometown, so I quickly became turned around. I spotted a group of 4 people walking toward a building, so I swallowed my anxiety and approached them to ask for directions. I should add that I am a shy and quiet person, so it took a bit before I piped up and excuse me. One of the 4 turned around, and my immediate thought was, oh my god, this guy looks like a fish. He had a big, creepy eyes and fat lips. He was blonde and a little chubby. This is purely for descriptive purposes. I am by no means a model. Still, I stifled my gawking and asked, do you know where the dining hall is? Oh yeah, it's right here. He motioned to the building directly behind us. Oh, wow, I'm dumb, I laughed. There was a small pause before he asked, you here alone? As someone who has run into predatory people before, this question never, ever sits well with me. My family will be here later. We all have sleeping problems, so they're catching up on sleep. They'll be here at 6. This wasn't a lie, but I hoped it would deter him from latching onto me. Oh, well, do you want to sit with us? I guessed that he had meant the group of 4 he was with, but the other 3 had already disappeared in the dining hall. Sure, I conceded. I immediately grabbed a 2-person table, which made me internally groan. I had a feeling of where this was going, and I wanted no part of it. I'm a lesbian, for Christ's sake. I didn't want to risk making him angry. I didn't want someone to hate me before the school year even started, so I sat down with him in a plate of eggs. I tried to make conversation, and he kept replying dryly with things like, oh, uh-huh, and mm-hmm. I thought that I had upset fish face, so I looked up from my plate to see him staring directly at my breasts. I'm a 36 double D, so unfortunately, used to this. I sighed and bagged out my sweater on my chest. Even after this and my slouching, he kept staring. After this, I didn't want anything to do with him, but I wasn't so lucky. Everywhere I went, he followed. Even in our orientation events were separate. I repeatedly tried to slip away from him before increasingly creeped out by his attempts at flirting, but everywhere I went, there was Fish Face. I gave it one last try, slipping away to the library. That's when the messages started. Somehow, Fish Face found my Snapchat. I guess that he searched my name. He kept messaging things like, where are you? Where did you go? I'm at X location. Knowing that he could see that I'd read them, I felt obligated to respond. Okay, I'll be there soon. This didn't stop with orientation. The beginning of my freshman year was marred with fish face encounters. Classes, trips to the store, student activities, it didn't matter. He was there, shadowing me. The constant messaging drove me to just delete my Snapchat. Thank Christ he never got my phone number. At this point, Fishface was incessantly hitting on me and reminding me of how much he liked me, despite numerous times of me stating that I'm not interested. When I made myself clear, it only seemed to make him push harder, as if he thought I was playing games with him. It became more and more common for him to put his arm around me, or try to hold my hand. This is where I drew the line. I told him, clear as day, I am not interested in you. I do not like men. Do not touch me. He pouted but relented, touching me, at least. The shadowing only got worse, to the point that I couldn't leave without my roommate. I couldn't get a single dorm for the actual school year. I became more exhausted, paranoid, and felt like he was a time bomb waiting to blow. After weeks of this, weeks of sheer anxiety, I spoke to my priest at my university. The father was deeply concerned and went so far as to walk me back to my dorm. He made me a promise that I would speak to security first thing the next day, which I agreed to. Security's first question was if I was really being stalked or if my anxiety made me believe that I was being stalked. When I cited the witnesses to his shadowing me, that was dropped. Then the question was I clear enough with him? I don't know how much clearer I could have been. After much back and forth, I managed to get a no-contact order against Fishface. I knew that a no-contact order only meant that he couldn't contact me and vice versa, rather than physically keeping him away from me. I was okay with this because at this point, I did not want to hurt this guy or to potentially impact his future. For the remainder of the year, there were no more attempts to contact me or be near me. I thought that would be the end of it. But then came sophomore year. I could never be sure if it was a coincidence or he was actually tailing me, but then he started appearing outside of every classroom door every coffee place, absolutely everywhere. I was in a rough place this year, totally unrelated to this, but it certainly didn't help. But due to the sheer emotional exhaustion I was battling, I couldn't give a damn. Okay, follow me. I promise that I'm not that interesting, but this is when I learned of the other victims. Their stories were identical to mine. 6 of them, mine being the 7th. They ran into Fishface, a totally innocent encounter, but then he started in on them, bombarding them with messages, following them, groping them, and trying to get them alone. I was horrified to find out that every one of these girls had reported him to university security. Every one of them was prescribed a no-contact order. 7 victims later, and this bastard was still on campus as if nothing happened. I learned that this was not uncommon for our university, on top of victim blaming. The more I learned, the more deeply my fear ran. It was open season, and these bastards had full protection. We could not do a thing to get the guys like Fishface off of our campus, and so I resigned myself to being followed by this fucker. Junior year came around, and initially, it seemed that Fishface had given up. I could not have been more wrong. It was pointed out to me by friends who I knew about the stalking that he was in the background of my every move. Throughout the year, he got closer and closer, until it became worse than I'd ever dealt with before. I was a member of campus conservationalists, and we were selling reusable grocery bags in lieu of our state banning plastic bags. And then after about 45 minutes apiece, I glanced to my right. He was there, just around the corner, staring directly at me. Ice-cold fear ran down my spine, and my stomach dropped. I tore my gaze away and tried to hide my panic. He hadn't been this close to me since freshman year. There was no mistaking it. He was here for me, and me alone. I texted my girlfriend, letting her know that what was happening. I'll be honest and say that the rest is a blur. I was too panicked to remember how we got back to my dorm safely. I thank God every day for my ultra-protective girlfriend. Just 2 days after that, he appeared in the hallway outside of my class. It was just reaching the end, and I was ready to call it a day. I glanced at my watch. It was 2:45 p.m. I wandered to the bathroom, ignoring Fishface lurking in the corner. I did my business and approached the door. It began to open, so I called out, "Oh, I got it," and opened it for the next person. Fishface. I felt my face go pale and my breath hitch. He stared directly at me with those creepy-ass blue eyes. His giant, floppy lips pulled into a small smirk before he turned and disappeared down the hall. My heart thumped in my chest as I re-entered the classroom. I felt myself shaking and tried to hide it. All that kept running through my head was, what was he doing? Why was he trying to get in the bathroom? I glanced down at my watch again and knew that I didn't have time to wait for my girlfriend as the class was minutes from ending. I asked the girl next to me to walk with me to my next class. She agreed without hesitation. She was a really sweet girl to begin with, and thank God for that. I finished my final class of the day and sped back to my dorm. I didn't get much sleep that night. I reported the incidences to security the next morning. I was met with the same pressing questions and doubts. I threw everything I had at them and asked them to watch the security cameras outside of my classroom to see him attempt to corner me in the bathroom. I had to threaten to contact state police before they relented and promised to investigate my claims. They informed me that no action would be taken. They said that they could find no evidence of the incidences. When questioned, Fishface said that him appearing around my classrooms and frequented spots around campus was purely coincidental, and he felt so awkward that he was going through this again. I took my second semester off junior year for unrelated reasons, yet I am relieved to not be on campus with that creep. He is still there. The other victims have mostly transferred to other universities due to the college's general mistreatment and poor administration. I start my senior year this August at the same university. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if he's going to step up his game. I listen to enough true crime to know what could happen. It scares me, like few things ever have. So Fishface, you disgusting motherfucker, let's not meet again. The worst 12 hours of my life. I've been meaning to post this here for a while. Wrote my first draft back in April, so it's taken a long time, and a lot of therapy for me to be able to think about this experience. I've noticed how many people's stories take place over weeks, months, even years, so I'm here to tell you mine. 12 hours of my life. I managed to block out a lot of memories surrounding this night, but early this year, I was mugged and my PTSD returned, as did a lot of the missing memories of those 12 hours. This is the first time I'm telling anyone the full story of what happened to me. I haven't told my partner, my therapist, my parents. No one knows the details. If there's anything that should be taken away from my story, it's this. Remember that you don't need to be polite to everyone you meet. The setting. In October 2018, I was age 18, in my first year at university in a big city in the UK. I'd always lived in the countryside before this, so was never very street smart. About a year before I went to uni, I had started a relationship with this guy, Jimmy, now my ex. It was my first real relationship and I thought the world of him, but it was not reciprocated in a loving and compassionate way. Jimmy started off as a very emotionally abusive and got progressively worse, but that's a whole other story. At this point, Jimmy and I had been together just under a year and had applied to universities in the same city, mostly by coincidence, and both moved to the same city. I wanted to have a proper student life, so got an accommodation in a student block on the other side of the city to him. Jimmy had been using drugs for quite a while, initially starting off just smoking weed, but this progressed rapidly, and by the time we were at uni, he was regularly doing a lot of hard drugs plus smoking weed multiple times a day. Honestly, I don't think he was ever not high. When we moved to university, we still saw each other every couple of days, and we found a regular drug dealer, Mark, that he had been using continually since we got there in September. Jimmy used to buy from Mark multiple times a week, so on a handful of occasions I had briefly met him. Mark lived a lot closer to my student accommodation than to Jimmy, so a couple of weeks before this all happened, Jimmy had started picking up drugs from Mark when he came to see me, meaning Mark would often be outside of my accommodation. Jimmy had asked me a few times if I would pick up the drugs he bought from Mark, but I had always felt weird speaking to Mark on my own, plus I rarely smoked weed, so I felt very weird picking up drugs in general. 6 p.m. One day at the end of October, Jimmy had plans to come and see me that evening, and asked me again if I would pick up some weed from Mark. I was in a good mood that day, and feeling more confident than usual, so for the first time I agreed to. Jimmy gave me Mark's number, and said that Mark would message me when he was on his way. Only around 10 minutes later, I got a message from Mark saying that he was nearly outside my apartment, and I needed to go outside, so I did. Outside of my accommodation, there was a quieter area with a lot of benches, so I sat and waited for him. Behind me was only a wall and a small contained area that had all of the bins for the building. Out of nowhere, I felt someone's hands on my shoulder in a really weird, creepy way. I jumped, obviously, and realized it was Mark, who I barely recognized as I had only briefly seen him a couple of times. I realized now that my back had been to the wall in the bin storage, so he must have been waiting there. I was immediately on guard because of how he touched my shoulders, especially because I didn't know him, so shifted away from him as he sat down next to me. He began talking to me as if we were buddies, asking me 1,000,001 questions about myself, like deeply personal questions. The whole time I was deflecting, not wanting to give out any information, so started asking him questions instead. He began a really deep monologue about himself and his life, where he openly told me he had just gotten out of prison a few months before. It was for armed something, some kind of violent crime. I engaged his ramblings, just nodding along, but still trying to get back to the whole point of just picking up drugs from my boyfriend. 7 p.m. I've always been able to talk to anyone and was always taught to be nice when someone is talking, so I ended up sitting there for around an hour trying to get the conversation back to the reason I was there. Pick up drugs from my boyfriend and go. It was so long, it actually started getting dark. This guy just kept talking. I knew my boyfriend was going to be coming over soon, so I kept looking at my phone to see if he was on his way, but he hadn't replied. Eventually, I told Mark that I needed to get back inside as I was meeting up with my boyfriend soon, and then going clubbing after with some friends, so I needed to get ready. And could I just please pick up the drugs? He then said, "Oh, well, I can't give them to you here. There's CCTV everywhere. We can go inside so that I can give them to you." I had witnessed him giving my boyfriend drugs in the same spot countless times before, so I knew this was bullshit. I didn't want Mark to come back to my apartment, so I told him that we could go into the lobby of my building where there was a disabled bathroom, and he could give me to them there. He agreed and followed me inside. We went into the bathroom. It was a very large bathroom, so I didn't have to be close to him, and he locked the door behind us. He then began fiddling with something in his pocket, I assumed the drugs, but instead pulled down his trousers fully and started peeing into the toilet. I was hugely freaked out. This guy just presented his dick to me, and began peeing, but I rationalized that there was no way he had any sexual motive because he had met me and my boyfriend together, so knew I was in a relationship. I figured he just really needed to pee. I just kept my eyes shut the whole time, and when he flushed, I thought that finally he would give me the drugs that I was here to collect. This whole thing had been going on for about an hour and a half at this point. He said, "I really want to roll myself a joint, but there's no space in here to do it. Can I come and roll it on your desk, and then I'll give you Jimmy's stuff?" I asked again if he could just give it to me now, and he said no, saying that I was being rude for not inviting him in. By this point, I was wanting to get ready to go out with my friends later that evening, and knew my boyfriend would be coming by any minute, so figured it'd be okay even though I didn't want to do this. It's worth noting that I was emotionally abused by my boyfriend and knew he would be mad at me if I didn't collect his drugs, or if I annoyed Mark because he was his favorite dealer. I honestly figured that Mark was harmless, despite him telling me he was a violent criminal, FML, and just assured myself that he was only a bit creepy. It would be fine. 8 p.m. Reluctantly, I took Mark up to my apartment, opened the door and let him in. I said he had to roll his joint fast because I had to get ready. Finally, he gave me the drugs that my boyfriend wanted, so I felt better at that point. He walked over to my desk, moved all the things to the side and sat down, getting out the things to roll his joint. I cannot roll a joint, but I've seen Jimmy do it countless times, so no, it doesn't take me more than a minute or so. Mark keeps trying to talk to me, but at this point, my answers are getting shorter and shorter. He rolls this joint so slowly I could not even describe it. He then said, "Well, I can't smoke this outside, so is it cool if I just stay here and smoke it? It'll only take 5 minutes to smoke." I said no and told him again that I had to get ready. He replied, "It's okay, you can get ready with me in here." By this point, I was over it. Messaged my boyfriend again to tell him to hurry up. Mark asked me again, and in my frustration and wanting this guy out of my apartment, I just said, "Okay, sure, but be quick." I then went out my room into the shared kitchen. I only had 2 flatmates, and no one else was in the apartment that night. Grabbed some wine and a glass so that I could have some solitary pre-drinks and return to my room. I sat for another 15 minutes before increasingly less polite, but he kept talking to me. I drank my first glass of wine pretty fast and just decided if Mark was going to take ages, then I would just get ready to go out with my friends. I told him that as soon as he finished smoking, he could just leave on his own, so I left with him, sat at my desk, took some clothes into the bathroom, and jumped into the shower. 9 p.m. Maybe a minute or so into my shower, I heard some soft footsteps outside the door, and like a scene from a freaking horror movie, I saw the door handle slowly be pushed down. Thank fuck I remembered to lock the door. All of a sudden, Mark began banging on the door. I turned the shower off and just said, hi, through the door. He shouted through the door, asking me to let him in because he needed to pee again. I obviously said no and just got dried and dressed. Thankfully, I took clothes to the bathroom as fast as I could. By this point, I figured there was no way he was going to leave my apartment until I did, so I did my makeup as fast as I physically could and messaged my friends that I'd be coming to theirs sooner than I had planned. I still hadn't gotten a reply from my boyfriend, so I just told him that I was going out early and not to come over. I got ready to go and told Mark that I was leaving now, and he needed to come downstairs with me. He was still sat at my desk and ignored what I was saying. He asked if he could stay in my room while I was out because he was tired and wanted a nap. Finally, I was firm with him, and after a lot of convincing, he left with me. I made sure to order an Uber to my friend's place so that he couldn't try and walk with me, and by the time we got outside, my Uber was nearly there. He stood with me, looking over my shoulder at my phone the whole time. Then the Uber arrived. I got into it, and Mark straight up walked around the other side and got in. I was in disbelief and laughed, then told the Uber driver that I didn't know who this guy was, and that he wasn't getting in with me. The Uber driver was not as polite as me and told Mark to get out, and he did. 10 p.m. I sat there on the way to my friend's house and finally felt calm that I had gotten away from Mark. I called my friend from the Uber and told her what happened, so she said she would come outside of her building to get me with a group of her flatmates. My friend's accommodation was not far from mine, and took longer to get to by car than on foot because of the one-way system in the city. But I didn't care at this point. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes later I arrived, and my friend came over to my Uber, then brought me back to her group of friends. She had quite a few people with her, and I suddenly noticed that one of her male flatmates was talking to someone slightly away from the group. I looked over and suddenly realized he was talking to Mark. I guess he was looking at the address when I had the Uber app open earlier. I whispered to my friend and she freaked out and went inside with me straight away. I was super freaked out that this guy wouldn't just leave me alone, He refused to leave my side for the last few hours, and now he had followed me to my friend's house. Honestly, I felt much safer now and met a few creeps in my time, so just decided to get over with it by having a nice time with my friends. So we sat in our kitchen having a chat and some drinks. 11 p.m. After a while talking to her, I almost forgot what had happened just an hour ago and was getting increasingly tipsy from the wine. The kitchen door opened and her male flatmate comes inside, announcing that he invited a guy in who gave him some free weed. You guessed it, Mark walked in. Mark addressed me by name and walked over, putting his hands around my waist from behind. I get pretty confident when I drink, so had no problem pushing him off me and announcing to everyone in a jokey way, "Yeah, this is the guy who has been following me around all evening. I don't even know him." Even in this room with all of my friends' flatmates, I still didn't feel safe. He stayed away from me, looking at me for a while from the other side of the kitchen, and I just ignored him. My friend could tell I was uncomfortable, so we suggested we go for a drink in a room. Around 30 minutes after going into a room, the door slams open suddenly, and Mark is standing there. He says, "Oh, I was looking for the bathroom. Can I use yours?" My friend, who isn't in suit, she tells him to get the fuck out, and he does. I'm honestly just bored of this guy's constant presence at this point, so we decided to just go to the club early. 12 p.m. We grab our stuff, run past the kitchen door and outside. My friend orders an Uber, and we get in and go to the club. After a while, some of our flatmates join us, but Mark does not. Thank fuck. The people who had been in the kitchen said that Mark left shortly after he saw me and my friend leave, but there was no sign of him now. I just try and enjoy the night, but being a poor student, I can't afford any more drinks at the club. As I begin to sober up, I realize how shaken up and creeped out the whole evening made me, and I don't feel safe. 2 a.m. After only a couple of hours, I decided that I just want to go home and sleep because this whole experience freaked me the fuck out. I take an Uber back, use my key card to get into my apartment building, go upstairs and into my apartment. I started getting ready for bed, put on some pajamas, and started taking off my makeup. All of a sudden, I heard a loud knock on my door. I had no clue who it was, but since it was still early-ish for a Friday night, I thought my boyfriend maybe finally decided to show up. My door didn't have a peephole, so I walked to the door in my PJs, unlocked it, planning to open it a tiny bit to see who it was, and then bam! The door flew open so fast that I was pushed backwards into my apartment and then shoved into my room, which was directly across from the front door. In my panic, I froze, then looked up only to realize that Mark was now standing in my apartment. The realization started to sink in. Mark had just forced his way into my room, and I was trapped here with him. He was visibly angry and very high. He locked the door behind him and began rambling about how I was so rude for not inviting him in with my friends, for ignoring him, for not letting me in the Uber, etc. I was terrified, so ran over to my bed and grabbed my phone. He walked over behind me and began grabbing me, touching me as much as he could, so I shouted at him to get off. He saw my phone in my hand and immediately smiled. He told me to open the camera. I was terrified, so I did as he said, and he said he wanted a picture of us together. I did as I was told and took a selfie with him while he posed with his arms around me and then kissing my cheek and my neck. He then screamed at me to unlock my phone, so I did. He made me open up my messages and send Jimmy the selfie of me and Mark sat next to each other on the bed, so I did. He waited for it to send and then grabbed my phone and put it down on the desk. He sat at my desk for the next 4 to 5 hours, talking at me continually, saying how I was so rude. I needed someone to teach me some manners, how I had to do what he said because he was older than me, how Jimmy wasn't good enough for me, how I was so beautiful, and how he knew that I needed to be with him. He told me that his girlfriend knew he had been at my house that evening, and now she said he couldn't go home, and it was all my fault. The whole time I continued bargaining with him, trying to get him to leave, but it didn't work. Occasionally, I would just lie down on my bed or sit and not speak. Each time I did, he would get up and wrap his arms around me, or try and spoon me, stroking my face, trying to kiss me, and trying to take my clothes off and touch me. Every time I fought him off, and he would get angry again, and go and sit at the desk and keep shouting. I knew that this guy had previously been in prison for some kind of violent crime, so I did not want to piss him off. I just sat there for hours and quietly sobbed, too scared of trying to leave because I would have to walk past him to get to the door. I was out of options. I didn't know if I could get out without angering him. I couldn't call the police because he had my phone. My flatmates weren't in, so my screams meant nothing. 6 a.m. While he was at my desk, he kept smoking more weed or taking a line of whatever drug, so he was becoming more and more out of it. He was becoming more sleepy as he smoked more weed until I was able to speak between his ramblings, so I gently said I was going to the bathroom. I noticed he had his eyes partially closed and I figured I only had one chance, so I took the opportunity and grabbed my phone off the desk as fast as I could, unlocked the door, and ran out the apartment. The one thing I will always remember is being in tears, pressing the button for the elevator to come probably about 50 times because I was so scared that he was going to come after me. As I got into the elevator, I heard him come out of my apartment, shouting my name, but the elevator doors closed as he looked at me. I was able to get downstairs and out of the building. I ran around the corner of the building in my PJs and maniacally dialed the number for the police, told them what happened, and that this guy had been in prison until recently. The next thing I knew, around 5 police cars showed up. I was in such a state and called my boyfriend to tell him what happened. He was still awake and hadn't come to visit the night before because he was with a girl who was a friend, and said that he didn't want to come here with me because he said he had some weed on him and didn't want to be near the police. I told him to get to my place right now, and he reluctantly did. The aftermath. The police had to force entry to my apartment because Mark had locked himself in and barricaded the door. They arrested him, and he ended up going to prison for drug charges, but not for what he tried to do to me. The police said they couldn't prosecute him because I had willingly let him into my apartment earlier in the night, and he hadn't physically done anything. SA, an attempted R word, plus holding me hostage in my own apartment, but okay. After I'd given my statements to the police, I went back inside to see after I escaped my room was trashed. Mark had thrown things around and smashed things in anger. I'm so glad I got out when I did because I can't imagine what would have happened if I was trapped in the crossfire. I don't know what happened to Mark after that, but I moved out of that apartment a couple of months later and away from that city as soon as I could when COVID hit, to make sure Mark could never find me. I actually stayed in my abusive relationship for another year or so until I realized that I was too good to put up with Jimmy's shit. I had such severe PTSD from the incident that I couldn't go outside for months after, which messed up the whole of my first year of university. It has taken until now for me to be able to walk around at night, and being alone in public is still really difficult. I'm well aware that the ending is very anticlimactic, and I wish I had been able to advocate for myself, but I just shut down emotionally afterwards. I can't get too much into the details of the essay and attempted R word because, honestly, thinking about it makes me want to throw up, but I realized I was lucky to be able to fight him off every time because without a doubt he wanted to hurt me. After this all happened, I started volunteering with people in prison for crimes like SA to try and prevent them from ever reoffending. I think it is my way for advocating for others because I couldn't advocate for myself. If you take one thing away from this, stop being so polite. I was raised to be nice to everyone, and I realize now that being polite worsened everything. I wish I had never been polite enough to pick up drugs from my ex, or polite enough to let Mark into my apartment when he begged. So to Mark, fuck you. And please, let's not meet again. Help me. I'm lost. This is my first post and is a true story. I was living in a rural area in Oklahoma with my mother at a small lake house, and I'm probably 10 to 11 at this time. One night I'm sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly wake up for no reason. This was not normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring in the next room on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent, so I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. The bathroom is on the other side of the house, around a corner and past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right. So after I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distinct click of the light switch, and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Click, 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 click. Finally, it shut it completely off. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched to the floor. At this point, I'm frozen to the spot as my mind begins realizing that no one else is home except for my mom and myself. Then the white shape began whispering in a quiet man's voice, "Help me. I'm lost." I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't, and instead I barely said, "No." Before this thing starts running at me on what sounded like all fours, I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mother, shaking her awake. I remember saying, "It's coming, it's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure terror like that in my life, even to this day. She grabs me by the arms and pulls me into the room and slams the door. She holds me in her arms with her back pressed against the door as we listen. It sounded like this thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear its hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open then slammed. We sat there, horrified, until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town for a while after that, and never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the early 1900s. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still will not tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream. She tells me she's afraid it will know we're talking about it and it will come back. This is the first of many weird things that have happened in my life. A true, very creepy surveillance story. So first of all, I only just discovered this subreddit today, which reminded me of something that happened to me in 2008. This was a huge thing in my friends and family, and I didn't really talk about it back then as it scared the fuck out of me. But it was a while ago and is a really well-known creepy story among myself and my friends and family. But I think I may as well share it, as it is admittedly terrifying. I was living with my parents and sister in Brisbane, Australia at the time, 2008, which means I was 19. I remember my dad had just got a Foxtel, cable TV in Australia, but only the TV in the lounge room could use the cable box, and I really wanted to somehow get the cable in my room without paying $99 or whatever for a new box. So Dad one day went out and bought an AV transmitter/receiver. It was basically a 2-piece bit of hardware where you could plug this tiny box into the cable TV in the lounge room and it would transmit a video signal to the receiver, connected to the TV in my room. So one Saturday, I decided to connect it. This is a picture I took of the setup when I was telling a friend the story. My younger sister, 16 at the time, was the only other person home at the time, upstairs in her room. My room was downstairs. I opened the box and connected it up. At first, I was going back and forth, trying to get the cables right, trying to get the channel right, etc., but no luck until I finally got something. I remember just sitting there and something started fuzzing in. This is where things start to feel like a horror movie. I remember thinking, oh, here we go, and waiting to see the picture come in clearly. As it started fuzzing in, I remembered that this whole time the cable set top box wasn't even on, and that's why it wasn't working this whole time. But then why was I getting a signal? It seemed to all hit me at once. As I realized the box was off, the picture fuzzed in, and I saw a bed. First picture I took. I freaked the fuck out, as at first I thought it was my bed. I had recently seen Saw 2 and remembered that scene where she turns on the TV and it's a camera filming her in her own apartment. That was the first thing I thought of. I sprinted upstairs to my sister, absolutely terrified. I told her to come down and take a look. She came down and we both realized it wasn't my bed. We didn't know whose bed it was or how I was getting the signal. Obviously it was the AV receiver picking up a camera signal, but we were just so confused as to who/what it was for. Eventually my parents came home and we concluded that it would have to be a neighbor or someone living close by for us to be receiving the signal. We waited around until about 6 p.m. and then someone came into the room. My dad recognized it as one of our neighbors. We still didn't know what the camera was for, but we assumed it had something to do with fidelity. Either his wife or he had set it up to watch the other and see if they were cheating. Either this or it was to tape themselves having sex. We entertained the idea that he was a murderer and would film himself murdering people in his room, but just to freak each other out. We'd always make jokes about how one night we'll turn it on and it'll just be a face with a clown makeup, staring at the camera waving, and then him walking to the bedroom with a knife. This never happened. But what did happen was still super creepy. We connected to the signal for over a week, but after a few days the novelty kind of worn off. We felt a bit weird watching it and just reassigned to the explanation that it was to catch his wife cheating. Until one day, we turned it on and realized what we had discovered. Our neighbors were having a bunch of renovations done into their house. During weekdays they'd be out, and there would be workers at the place pretty much all day. It had been like this for over a month. We started watching the feed and saw a man walk into the room. It was the plumber that had been there regularly for the renovations. We didn't think anything of it until he started opening drawers. I called out to my mom, only person home at the time, and we started watching it. He started getting the wife's underpants and sniffing them, doing all that creepy shit. At first, we were like, oh my god, how embarrassing he's being filmed. Will the neighbors see this somehow? And then what happened next was truly terrifying. He slowly walks over to the camera and looked right down the fucking lens. We were convinced that he knew we were watching. Mom immediately called Dad. I kept watching. He started fiddling with it and then put it back down. I told Mom that I don't think he knew we were watching, but he's definitely the guy that put the camera there. Dad came home, and by this time the plumber had left, much to Mom's pleading. Dad went over to the neighbors to tell them what we saw. Mom wanted to completely stay out of it and was terrified, understandably. When we told the neighbors, they had no idea what we were talking about. They allowed Dad to go up to their room, and what we found, that was holding the camera, was an installed device in the wall that was designed to monitor water usage, which was completely normal at the time, as Brisbane had been hit with a drought recently, and there were lots of water restrictions. Still is now, I think. The plumber had installed this into the wall, but had fitted a camera behind it in the wall to watch the bed. Immediately, they called the police, who came over and conducted an investigation. For the next week or so, we didn't hear much about it. I spent most of this time just telling my friends, showing them pictures, but truthfully, my whole family was scared every night. It was just very creepy thinking that we could have stuff like that hidden in our house. Chances are we didn't, but it was still really scary. After a couple of weeks, my mom was speaking to the wife next door and asked what happened with it all. The wife said that the police found out he would, at nights, come to our street and sit in his car, which had really tinted windows, and watch them on his laptop. When Mom told me this, I got the biggest shivers. The reason was, besides the obvious of a creepy dude sitting in his car watching people through a hidden camera, was because on multiple nights, when I had driven home late from the girlfriend's house or walked home drunk after a night out, I remember seeing a station wagon. Don't know if that's what they're called outside of Australia, but it's like a big hatchback car. Always about 30 meters down the street from our house. It was never there during the day, always at night. I'd always walk past it and look at my reflection in the windows, assuming no one was inside. I was always so confused by whose car it was, but literally never thought it was anything. It still scared me so much that it was just this creepy fucking plumber sitting back in there on a laptop, watching a hidden camera stream of my neighbors. Anyway, that's my story. It's all true, and still creeps me out to this day, but my friends and I have a good laugh about it. Home Alone, true story. While growing up, I often had opportunities to stay home alone when I was younger, since my mother and father were forced to travel because their parents were ill and lived overseas, and my much older siblings wouldn't get off work until at least an hour or two after I finished school. I was used to being home alone, and actually enjoyed it. One Saturday when I was 12, my parents had to go to a funeral for an old friend in the next city. My brother had already moved out by then, and my sister was nowhere to be found, so my parents decided to leave me home alone for the entire day. I was so excited. Being home alone for a whole day meant I could blast music and spend as much time as I wanted on the computer. When my brother moved out, we converted his bedroom, the last one at the end of the hallway, into an office, and my computer was in there. We still had dial-up internet at the time, so my parents added an extra phone line in the house so I would stop taking up their line. I ran into the office to use what I called my personal phone line to call my friend who lived a few streets over to see if she wanted to come hang out. She was really upset. She told me she was having boyfriend problems and needed someone to talk to, so she'd be right over. I thought to myself, girl talk means we need a good treat, and ran to the office so that I could go check out what was in the kitchen. That's when I saw her. A pale woman, dressed all in black, with a black bun on her head. Her head tilted as I ran by the corner. I couldn't really see her eyes, but for some reason, I remember thinking that she was smiling. I got some serious chills and felt instantly frozen, but I ignored it, thinking I was paranoid from being alone all day, and ran down the stairs. I couldn't believe my imagination was playing tricks on itself like that. I called my friend to see if she had left yet, and since no one answered the phone at her house, I figured she had. Something still didn't feel right, so I put on my jacket and headed out of the driveway to wait for her. When she arrived, she asked me what I was doing outside. I said, something weird just happened, but I'll tell you over hot chocolate. And we went inside, took off our coats, and drank our hot chocolate in the kitchen, while she told me about her problems she was having with her boyfriend. Since both her boyfriend and I had webcams, we knew we had friends over, we went into my computer room upstairs to call him and see if him and his friends wanted to web chat with us. While she was on the phone with him, I was talking to his friend on the computer and setting up my webcam. While my friend was on the phone, she turned around and looked out the door into the hallway. She told her boyfriend that she'd have to call him back. She looked at me, wide-eyed and white-faced, and said, "There's a woman in your hallway wearing a black dress." I got up from my computer chair and closed the door without looking into the hallway. I frantically tried to remember if I had told her why I was outside when she got there. I then asked her, "Didn't I mention that when you got here?" And she said no. And I said, "How was her hair?" And my friend said, "In a bun." We both freaked out, opened the door, made sure the coast was clear, and bolted down the stairs. I called my parents and told them I was going to my friend's house, but they told me they were here a few minutes away and insisted that I wasn't leaving the house. When they got home, I told them what happened, but they didn't believe me. For the next few days, I kept thinking I was seeing her, but I wasn't sure if it was my imagination because I was scared or because she was really there. Weird things happened too, like the calendar in my bedroom would be upside down when I got home from school, or things would go missing from my room. Eventually, these weird occurrences stopped, but a couple of months later, we adopted a 2-year-old cat. From the moment she was brought home, all the way up to today, she has 3 or 4 random corners of the house that she meows at constantly, and every once in a while, after meowing at a particular spot, she shrieks and runs away as fast as she can. One of those spots is in my bedroom, and lately, she's been meowing at it every night. The marketplace deal that almost trapped me. I was browsing Marketplace when I came across an ad for an SUV, a Saturn Vue in great condition, but here's the kicker. It was priced at about 50% below market value. I thought, this has to be a scam, but curiosity got the better of me. The ad had a phone number, so I called it. A young guy picked up, sounding friendly enough, and went on about how the vehicle was in perfect shape. When I asked why he was selling it, he mumbled something about wanting something sportier. Yeah, right, I thought, but I was intrigued enough to agree to go check it out. That's when things got weird. He insisted I bring cash. A dark feeling crept over me, a warning sign, but I brushed it off. I had the money, and against my better judgment, I brought it. As I drove to the address he'd given me, that uneasy feeling turned into full-blown dread. I was literally seconds away from pulling into the house when I called him again to confirm. His first question, "Do you have cash?" My gut twisted. I answered yes, but something told me not to park in front of the house. Instead, I parked a block up the street and decided to wait. I sat there for a few minutes, looking around. There was no Saturn Vue in sight, no signs of any vehicle for sale. The street was eerily quiet, almost too still. Then, out of nowhere, a white Audi station wagon slowed down in front of the house. Inside, I saw a group of young men, all of them scanning the area. They looked tense, on edge, as if they were searching for someone or something. They didn't spot me, tucked away further up the street. I watched as they crept slowly past the house, their eyes darting around, until they finally drove past me. They didn't suspect I was sitting there with a fat envelope of cash. I could feel my heart pounding as I watched them drive away. It all felt wrong, very wrong. My gut had been screaming at me from the start, but now I knew this wasn't about a car. This was about setting someone up for something much worse. I drove home, feeling both ashamed that I'd let it get this far, and grateful that nothing had happened. Yet. Later, I contacted the police. I gave them the ad number, the phone number, and told them exactly what had happened. I insisted they do something before someone got hurt. Days passed, and to my knowledge, they did nothing. Then, the news broke. Story after story surfaced of people being lured by ads just like the one I saw, told to bring cash, only to be threatened with guns or knives and robbed of their money. No descriptions of the perpetrators were ever given, just vague warnings telling people to be careful. Even now, I wonder what might have happened if I had pulled up to that house. What if I had ignored my gut feeling completely and walked right into whatever they had planned? All I know is, sometimes a great deal isn't worth the risk. Trust your gut. True scary stories. Hi Snook, my name is Tala. I heard you were taking user-submitted stories, so I thought I'd send mine in. You should know, while this isn't a paranormal story, it is 100% true. It's also probably a shorter one than your usual bit, but here we go. I'm a 30-year-old woman who lives in the White Mountains region of New Hampshire. For privacy, I will not tell you the exact name of the trail I went on this day because I live in the town nearby it. However, what's important to know about this trail is that it's a nature preserve, specifically a bird reserve. The trail is long and flat and it ends in a beautiful pond. About 2 years ago now, I got really into bird photography. I bought some books about birding, specifically one that detailed birds found in New Hampshire, where to go to see them, and what times they are usually most active. It was March of that year, a little early in the birding season, but still. The migration trackers showed that the first of the loons would be in my area. The book listed the pond down this trail near my hometown as the prime spot to view these beautiful birds. Of course, they are most active at sunrise, so in order to get the best chance of seeing them, I'd have to hike out the trail in the dark and be at the viewing spot by the time the sun came up. I'm a morning person, so I was genuinely excited to get out on the trail and see the birds. I left my house around 3:30 a.m. to hit the trail. I had a hiking pole, a headlamp, my camera, my stand, my binoculars, and whatever wits I could scramble together so early in the day. When I got out to the trail, I took inventory of my belongings and headed out. Usually I'm a solo hiker, but normally I will hike during the day. I do small trails by myself, but let my husband know where I'm going and when I'm expected to be back. Under normal circumstances, the trails are often crowded and busy. At least I can expect to meet other people on the way, not this day, not this hike. It was my first time hiking in the dark and the trail was completely void of all activity. There were no posted hours in the reserve, just that travelers respect the wildlife and don't touch anything outside what is strictly necessary on the trail. The walk to the pond is only 2 miles, so I was expecting to take my time in the dark and get there around 6 a.m. so I could watch the sun come up. Note, these are approximate hours. I can't remember the exact hours of the sunrise that day. About a mile in, I heard a strange noise from the trees. It was a low, guttural sound like a distant boat revving its engine. At first, I thought it had to be an airplane from the nearby airport. However, the sound got louder and significantly closer, and I realized that it was no plane. 2 pinpricks of light were visible in the trees. I couldn't see what it was, but something big was stalking me. I don't know if you've ever been in a life or death situation. Had been in one before, but it was nothing like this. The last time I faced death in circumstances that were under my control, I put myself in a position where death was possible. I'd been S-word and almost acted on it, but I didn't. I took control of my situation and got help. This time it was out of my control. Primal, instinctual fear washed over me like a cold bath. My legs felt like jelly. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Thankfully, I didn't. My boss at the time was a man who hiked often, even solo hikes. He'd crossed several big predators, from bobcats to coyotes to bears and to moose. He knew better than almost anyone how to face big animals that could easily take your life. He told me what to do if I ever faced any one of those creatures, and running was not in the protocol. Instead, I squared my shoulders, faced the eyes that were still watching me, made myself as tall as possible, and screamed loudly. Later on, I'd remember that I actually had a whistle in my camera bag just for the situation, but in the moment, I didn't think about the whistle. I screeched as loud as my voice would let me go. Go away. In college, I learned how to do screamo music, and I put that practice to use here. The response was an equally loud and vicious scream back. It sounded like a woman being chopped up. The creature took a step towards me. I still didn't know what it was, but I had a feeling that it was a bobcat. I screamed back. I stood at this spot sharing a screaming match with the creature for a good 5 minutes before it finally left. I debated what my next move ought to be. Should I turn back? Should I plunge on? I was halfway between the stop and the start of the trail. If I went forward, I may potentially have encountered this creature again, but if I went back, I'd also have potentially encountered this creature, but I also would miss the birds. I decided to go on. When I got to the dock, I set my camera up and got several beautiful shots of the sunrise. Unfortunately, the loons did not want to hang that morning, so I didn't see them, but I did see several beautiful ducks and geese, plus some songbirds. While I was snapping photos using my telescopic lens, I heard a chilling sound. Howls, and not too far away. Coyotes who were nearby. I finished up my pictures and packed my bags. On the return trip, trailgoers were starting to arrive, some with their own dogs in tow. I didn't encounter any other animals. However, I found out from my neighbor, who works for the Forest Service, that Only the day before my adventure, he'd released a mama bobcat and her kitten into the reserve where I was hiking. I thought it was maybe a little irresponsible of them to release the creature where a lot of people go, but he told me that the bobcat was scared of people and would run away when encountering a human. The only reason it stood up to me was because I was the only one there. Creepy stuff. Anyways, thanks for sharing, if you do, and enjoy your night. Tala. P.S. Enjoy these pictures from my hike. And those pictures are beautiful, and thank you so much for your story. I'm glad you're still with us, and I'm glad that bobcat didn't decide to do anything, extreme. But thank you so much for the story, and now to the next one. Hello, Snook. This thing happened to me about 7 years ago, and forgive my language, I'm not a native English speaker. First, the context. This happened in a very rural Finland. No neighbors within 10 kilometers in every direction, type rural, and the forest around is extremely thick. It was summer vacation and we were going to my grandpop's. He is divorced and lives alone in a rural area, as I already said. The time it takes to go there is 6 hours, and being the moody teenager back then, I was not looking forward to the 2 weeks with no internet and the drive itself. During the first day, it was pretty normal. The second and third day passed and I was extremely bored, so on. The fourth day, I decided to go for a walk. I decided to go for a forest walk as I have a map mind and have never gotten lost. In the third hour of my walk, I started seeing bones. This did not freak me out since it was in the middle of the forest where bears roam around. I was completely calm until I saw a baby moose hanging by its feet on a tree with its intestines completely ripped out, nowhere to be seen. I had a full-on panic attack and started running home. I was full of adrenaline and I thought I heard someone running behind me. Don't know if it was a hallucination or just me hearing things wrong. Finally, after 2.5 hours, I got home. It was already dark, so I was more than glad to be home. The next day after my parents went for a walk, I asked my grandpop about the moose. Had he ever seen something similar? And he got real quiet and told me this. Apparently, he had found a similar moose in the same state, but instead of being scared, he decided to find out what did it. He proceeded to lay on the ground for 1 hour until he saw the thing. He told me it looked like a bear, but with a human face. He got scared shitless and started running for his life. He then showed me a big-ass scar on his rib and told me he barely survived. Old man thinks he should have died due to the amount of he bled. He didn't want to tell me exactly what happened, but said it was a miracle. Now, after 7 years and him being gone, I still never go to that forest. Rest easy, Grandpops, and thanks for taking the time to read this. And if this makes it to the video, reminder to ask about your grandparents' lives. They are truly full of wisdom and sometimes scary happenings. The Cursed Dairy Farm. Hey Snook, first I wanted to say thank you for your great content. I've been watching your videos for 2 months now, and I love them. There's nothing better than listening to your videos while working on the dairy farm, early in the morning or late at night. Keep going, and I hope you reach 500K on YouTube soon. Thank you so much for those kind words, and I really hope I reach 500K soon. So all of you watching, if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe right now so we can get closer to that goal sooner. And now to her story. If you want to give me credits, just use my real name, Lennox. Sorry, English is not my first language. I'm from Germany, so I try my best to write it as good as possible. This creepy thing happened last summer to me and my best friend Maurice during the holidays. We had planned a bike tour to my grandparents, who lived in the former GDR, German Democratic Republic. That was the half of the Germany that, after World War II, fell into the hands of the Soviet Union and became a communist regime until Germany reunited in 1989. That is important for the story because today, East Germany, at least in the countryside, is pretty run down. The infrastructure is much worse and older compared to the rest of Germany, which gives the whole region an eerie feeling. Many old houses from the 70s and 80s are abandoned or in very bad condition. There are huge fields and deep, dark forests as far as the eye can see, and except for some villages, you can barely see people outside on the streets. Maurice and me didn't mind, because it was still bright outside and a beautiful day. After about an hour, we crossed the border, and after another hour, we arrived, exhausted and with a bad sunburn, at my grandparents' house. We planned to eat something and then set up a tent in the field behind the house because we wanted to stay overnight and have a few drinks to not disturb my grandparents at night. We decided against sleeping in the house and moved to the field instead. For context, my grandparents live in a village with maybe 40 people, deep in East Germany. The next big city is at least 3 hours away, and there isn't even a police station in the district, which always scared me a bit. Back in the 70s, my grandparents owned a big dairy farm, which was very modern for the time. But after Germany's reunification in 1989, they had to sell the farm to a big company because there were no buyers for their milk anymore. The western part of Germany had cheaper and better alternatives. Since the sale, the farm has only gone downhill. Many of my grandparents' old employees lost their jobs because the new owner simply had no use for them. The farm became outdated and neglected, and the cows suffered too. With too few workers, they weren't taken care of properly. You could see it in the animals. Many were skinny, sick, or barely gave any milk. My grandma always told me the same story, over and over again. When I was a kid and later a teenager, a story that everyone in the tiny town knew. The second co-owner of the dairy farm, we call him Oscar for the story, helped my grandparents build the farm from nothing in 1970, but unlike them, he didn't want to sell a share. He was too proud of his life's work, even though he was offered a lot of money, about 500,000 marks, German money at the time, which today would be more than 1.2 million euros. The buyers started coming to his house every day, making him more and more desperate. He began drinking heavily, and one evening he said to my grandma, let's just call her Holly for the story, "Holly, I'm sorry, but I can't do it anymore. I won't sell, but don't worry. Tomorrow morning, you will see me. You will see how free I am." My grandma was very worried. The next day at 4:30 a.m., she woke up to milk the cows for the first time that day. The moment she stepped into the barn, she felt it. Something was off. It was the middle of summer, but it was raining like crazy. The whole atmosphere was heavy, she said, like a cold shiver running down her spine. She turned on the lights in the milking area, and there he was. Oscar had aged himself. My grandma was in shock. She couldn't believe he really did it. His body was already stiff, frozen in death, but his arm was pointing at the concrete wall, where he had scratched something into the stone. In big letters, it said, "I am free." Since his death, that part of the barn was closed off. No one used it anymore. My grandma and some of her old colleagues swore that, when they passed the barn early in the morning, they could hear quiet cries for help. They all said the same thing. It sounded just like Oscar. As a kid, I had nightmares about it. The whole village knew the story. But now, back to last summer, Maurice and I had a speaker, enough beer, and a bit of corn, hard German liquor, and we rode our bikes to a lake outside the village, maybe 1 or 2 miles away. The creepy part? The old dairy farm was between the village and the lake. My grandparents always told me that ever since Oscar's death and the farm's takeover, something wasn't right there. The cows kept getting sick, the food rotted too fast, and there were way too many miscarriages. The cows were aggressive, really aggressive, which is weird because I work with cows too and they're normally peaceful animals. At the lake, we had a great time drinking and laughing. When I told Maurice the story about Oscar, it was already dark, and for the summer, it was pretty cold. A storm was coming, so we decided to go back. Of course, after just 5 minutes of biking, it started pouring rain. And let me tell you, biking drunk in the dark in the rain is a shitty combination. Then we reached the old dairy farm. By now, it was thundering too. Maurice and me, we always loved exploring abandoned places at night, old factories, houses, forests, and we looked at each other. I felt this terrible feeling in my stomach, but at the same time, we had to see it. The barn, the one from the story. It was silent, too silent, no lights anywhere. The only thing we saw and heard was the rain hitting the ground. We climbed over the gate. The smell hit us first. I work with cows. I know what a farm should smell like that, but this was rot, like the animals weren't taken care of at all. When we opened the first barn, I will never forget what I saw. The cows, so skinny, covered in wounds, standing ankle deep in their own filth, and the worst part, they were completely silent, just standing there, lifeless, except for one. One cow was pacing back and forth, slamming itself against the metal gate. Maurice wanted to leave, but I needed to see the room. We found the barn where Oscar died. The moment we stepped inside, my whole body screamed at me to leave. And then we saw it. The rope. The words on the wall. I felt sick. I threw up. Maybe from the beer, maybe from the fear. Then lightning struck. The whole room lit up, and for just 1 second we saw him. A shadow hanging from the rope. His arm reaching towards the wall. We screamed. We ran. The cows started screaming too. Not mooing. Screaming. I don't remember jumping the gate. I just remember getting on the bike and riding as fast as I could. Even at my grandparents' house, we still heard the cows. Marie swears it was the alcohol, but I know what I saw. And I still hear the screams in my dreams. Hi Snook, I'm unsure if this experience of mine will reach you, but nonetheless, I would love to share it with you. Before we start, I would like to say that I love your videos and the way you narrate things. It just gives me such a thrill and hooks me to the stories. I'm an interior design student, so I have to do a lot of work. Hence, listening to your stories helps a lot to keep me engaged as well as entertained. Thank you and keep up the good work. Now, I'm originally from Nepal, age 20, but this creepy incident took place when I was just 6 or 7 years old in Norway, where my father was completing his PhD at the time. He was often away, deeply absorbed in his work and studies, which meant that it was usually just my mother, my sister, and me at home. We lived in an old house owned by a kind elderly couple who lived on the floor below us with their dog, but there was something off about that house that always gave me a sense of unease. The couple's son lived above them, on the top floor. It was as though his experience was a mere shadow. He rarely came out of his room, and when he did, it was fleeting, almost as if he were a ghost. The upper floor felt different, too. It was cold, even when the lights were on. The atmosphere remained thick and oppressive, like it was always shrouded in just darkness. I was a child, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something not quite right about that floor. I'd find myself running down the stairs to escape its heavy, eerie presence. One evening, when my father was staying at my friend's house, my mother, sister, and I were home alone. The elderly couple had gone on a week-long trip to Europe and asked us to look after the house in their absence. That night, after dinner, we were gathered in the kitchen when we suddenly heard noises coming from downstairs. At first, we thought it was just the son, maybe doing something in his room, but the sounds grew louder, far too loud. It was as though someone was dragging heavy furniture across the wooden floors. The sound was unmistakable, the screeching of furniture scraping against timber, a noise that echoed throughout the house. The old houses in the countryside were built with timber, and the floors creaked with every movement. But this wasn't just a creak, this was deliberate, like someone was moving furniture, dragging it from one side of the room to the other. We all exchanged glances, confused, but didn't think too much of it. After all, it was his house. He could do whatever he wanted, even if it did sound strange. The noise continued, growing louder, until suddenly there was a bang. The door to the son's room slammed shut and the house fell into an eerie silence for a moment. But then, the strangest thing happened. We heard the sound of a wood-cutting machine. Now, imagine it, 10 o'clock at night, in a house that was supposed to be empty, and the unmistakable noise of a saw cutting through wood echoed through the halls. It was as if someone was in there, in the dead of night, chopping wood as if it was some routine task. My mother, sister, and I stood frozen, unsure of what to make of it. It was unsettling, but we all brushed it off as the son's doing. It was his space after all, and who were we to judge what he was doing in the middle of the night? When the elderly couple returned, we went downstairs to greet them, expecting to hear about their trip, but when we saw their son with them, we were taken aback. He was back. However, there was something we didn't know. He hadn't been at the house at all that week. He had been away, spending time with friends. He hadn't even returned home before his parents had left for the trip. So, who had been in that house making those noises? Who had been dragging furniture, slamming doors, and operating a wood-cutting machine in the dead of night? My mother, sister, and I were left in a state of confusion and fear. To this day, we have no answers. We still wonder what it was we heard. Was it someone who had broken into the house, or was it something far more sinister, a spirit perhaps lingering in the shadows, making its presence known to us? The house held more secrets too. Over the years, we encountered more strange, unexplainable things within those walls, but that night, those strange, haunting sounds remained the most vivid, and the mystery still lingers. I can't help but feel that something unseen was there, watching us. If you're curious to hear more, I'd be glad to share. Love your videos, and thanks for reading my experience. Stay happy, stay healthy. And that is really creepy. I did not expect that at all. I expected the guy to be just some weirdo that was doing something in the middle of the night, but he wasn't there. That's really, really weird. I would love to hear more experiences of yours if you feel comfortable sharing. So make sure to just hit back the email, and you can see another one of your stories in a future video, because yeah, that's really, really interesting. I'd love to hear more about that. Hey Snook, big fan of the channel. Love listening to your videos while working. Keep it up. Wish you all the best. I work at a 3-story interstate hotel. Nothing fancy, but a nice place to stop at when driving long distance. The next closest city is roughly 35 minutes away. When I say the hotel is in the middle of nowhere, I really mean it. I'm a full-time housekeeper at this hotel. On this day, I'm on the 2nd floor and leave the room I'm cleaning to grab towels from my cart in the hallway. When I see it, on the room at the end of the hall, there is a woman staring at me. I only see half of her face peeking at me from the door. She's smiling and blankly staring towards me. I make eye contact with her for a second or two and go back to my room. I brush it off as a weird guest, after all. It is an interstate hotel and we do get tweakers and odd people often. Something just didn't feel right about this person. I messaged my manager. Hey, is there a guest in room 239? I watch as the message goes from delivered to read. She responds with, no. Last guest checked out at 11 a.m. Is everything all right? I proceeded to tell her everything I saw. About 10 minutes later, front desk staff arrive on the 2nd floor and say we should go check it out. I'm obviously nervous, but as the only guy housekeeper here, I decided to act brave and walk with her to the room down the hall. Knock, knock, knock. Housekeeping. No answer. Knock again, still nothing. I use my key to unlock the door. It opens about an inch. Through the crack in the door, I can see that the security latch is on. Someone needs to be in the room to put it on the door. I yell again. Housekeeping? Hello? Still no answer. The lady from the front desk tells me to stay at the door while she goes downstairs and gets a magnetic rod to open the security latch. When we finally get the door open, all of the lights are off. The heater is on, but the room is cold. And the only thing we hear is the shower running. We stare at each other, then go to the bathroom door, opening it slowly. All the lights are off, but the shower is on full heat. I turn off the shower and inspect the room. It's empty. I don't know what I saw, but it wasn't a person. This isn't the first unexplainable thing that's happened at this hotel. The paper shredder in my manager's office will sometimes go off, even though she isn't there. Mounted photos in the rooms have fallen off the wall. And the automatic glass doors in the front will sometimes open with nothing triggering it. This experience is different. I actually saw something. I've talked to my coworkers and they've said they've experienced odd behavior but never physically seen anything. I don't know why this thing that haunts my hotel decided to show its face to me, but I think about it often and am debating finding another job. Hey Snook, I love listening to your true stories during my 12-hour shifts. Makes the day go by quicker, so I figured I'd submit my own. Thanks for all you do. My roommate and I love going on mountain drives. I've lived in my college town my whole life and I'd gone on this mountain road hundreds of times as a kid. So when college rolled around during any life event or just to get away, she and I would get coffee and go drive on a regular 30-minute route and just talk or debrief. Now, it's been so long I can't even remember what initiated this drive, but one day, freshman year, we headed out around 8 p.m., getting in my car and starting our route, minus the coffee. The first 15 minutes of the drive was unremarkable. I'm assuming we talked about our friend group or what was going on with our romantic interests when nearing where the mountain began to slip down. Bright headlights appeared behind us. We didn't think anything of it as we had seen multiple cars in the parking lots on our drive, and lots of people took this route as a more scenic option during the day. Continuing our conversation, I looked back to the road before my roommate stopped mid-sentence to say, wow, they're really coming by quick. At this rate, I looked at my rearview mirror again and saw that she was right. They were coming fast. I got annoyed and within seconds they were right behind my car, almost hitting it in the process. Keeping my eyes on the headlights, I continued to drive, assuming they would pass by me as clearly they had somewhere they needed to be. And there was no oncoming traffic, but after about 5 minutes of this car riding my tail so close I couldn't see their headlights, they start flashing their high beams into my car and decelerating, then accelerating to get even closer. At this point, I was pissed. I was going the speed limit and no other cars were heading our way in the lane next to us. It was just this car and mine in the middle of nowhere. Assuming it to be a teenager or someone trying to be an ass, I asked my roommate if she could see who was driving, to which she said she thought it was just one guy. I slowed down as a result, to about 5 under to try to get him to pass to this point. We were on a flatter road right next to the base of the mountains. However, in response to my slowed speed, the person speeds by my car, nearly clipping it. My roommate and I uttered an asshole and continued the drive, which had been interrupted by this douche. Considering we were at the base of the mountain, we had about 10 minutes until we were out of a more rural area and back into the outskirts of our college town. As we crossed one of the bends of a slightly wooded area, we see his car pulled off to the side of the road, headlights still on. I continued driving past him when, within seconds of us passing, he pulls out behind us and begins doing the same things he had been doing before, flashing his lights, accelerating and decelerating, and almost hitting my car. At this point, both me and my roommate were more scared than mad. I have a pretty recognizable car as I have a lot of anime stickers and sayings posted on it, so he had to have known it was us. Before I could give the thought any more time to process, he sped off in front of us, almost hitting my car again and causing me to swerve sharply. I was livid but felt slightly relieved as I continued to watch him drive up ahead of us and fully take a left turn onto a more rural road that leads out of town. So, as to avoid him, I took a shortcut to the right about 700 feet before his turn that wrapped back into our town. After about 5 more minutes without incident, we started talking once more when I had to take a right to get back onto one of the main roads that leads into our town. I vividly remember looking both ways and seeing no headlights coming from the left before making my turn when within 30 seconds, the same car is behind us again doing the same thing. Meaning he had to have gone out of his way to get back onto this route into our town and turned off his headlights so we couldn't see him to the left of us. At this point, we were both extremely nervous, not only because of him trying to drive us off the road, but also due to the fact that my roommate pointed out that it was now 3 men, not one, in the car, and we were 2 19-year-old girls. I then tell her I'm going to drive to a police station, so I don't want them to know where we live, to which she agrees to. When a truck pulls out from one of the farmhouses, thinking it was another one of their vehicles, we kept our guard up, only to notice they'd begun slowly decelerating and turn his brights fully off, which was enough to calm us down until we got back into the outskirts of our town. I kept my eyes on the headlights, which at this point were following behind us at a normal distance, and watched as he pulled off into a random neighborhood as the truck was still behind him, making our final turn back into town. I watched as the truck continued forwards and no headlights were behind us once more as both of us took a breath. To this day, we no longer live in the dorms and still take our mountain drives, but safe to say, we never go at night. I was around 11 or 12, living in a deeply religious household where every little rule seemed etched in stone. I was the youngest and definitely the most spoiled, so having my own phone, an old iPhone 4 or 5, was a big deal. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I received a text from an unknown number. It was a list of religious guidelines, formatted with bullet points. I don't remember every word, but one line chilled me to the core. Do not look into mirrors at night with focus. The wording was strangely specific. Our religion is ancient, so I figured it meant not to stare too long at our reflections in the dark. Still, the emphasis on mirrors unsettled me. I shrugged it off and drifted back to sleep. The next day felt normal, except the text was gone. I searched every message on my phone, but it had vanished, as if it had never been sent at all. Yet that single warning about mirrors took root in my mind. Night after night, I began avoiding them. I'd rush through the bathroom, washing my hands so fast that I never dared glance upward. And even the thought of walking past that many mirrors in our home after dark sent shivers down my spine. A week later, alone at home one night around 10 p.m., my family had gone out, leaving me behind to finish some homework. I decided to confront my fear. Fueled by a reckless mix of defiance and curiosity, I resolved to prove that the warning was nothing more than an eerie message. I approached one of the sinks outside the bathroom, steeling myself, and stared into the mirror. I leaned in close, my face nearly pressed against the cold glass, and fixed my eyes on my own pupil, determined to defy the fear that had haunted me for days. In less than a second, a wave of dizziness crashed over me, like the disorienting rush you feel when you stand up too fast. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, when I dared to look back into the mirror. My blood ran cold. There, standing next to my reflection, was a girl. Not just any girl, but a tall, spectral figure with skin the color of cracked stone. Her hair hung in disarray, partially obscuring a face where eyes should have been. Instead, there was only an endless void, a gaping emptiness that seemed to suck the light from the world. For 2 long, heart-stopping seconds, we just stared at each other. Then, as if the moment had never happened, I looked to the side. only to find nothing there. I'm not really good at storytelling. I'm sorry for any inconsistencies, as this was around 15 or so years ago. I was young and sheltered. Now that I'm older, I have read countless stories of cryptids and other creatures, and to this day I believe that there were no creature of nature. It's kind of short. Please email back with any questions if you do decide to. Feel free to paraphrase or anything for clarity. If you want a credit, my name is Rusty. Well, thank you, Rusty, for the story. I never really thought much about desert survival. I mean, I lived in Utah. I've seen the dry, cracked earth and the endless stretches of red rock plenty of times, but seeing something and surviving it are two very different things. It started on a school trip, some big geology things like erosion and ancient riverbeds, how the land used to be underwater millions of years ago. I wasn't paying attention. I never did. The bus smelled like body odor and mold, and all I wanted was to get back home. We stopped at some canyons, one of those places they slap a plaque on and call historic. The guide was rambling about the formations, pointing at different layers in the rock. Everyone else was either pretending to listen or taking pictures, and this is the first time I saw one of them. At first, I thought it was a coyote. It was standing up on the ridge, just past the group watching us. Thin and scraggly, like it hadn't eaten in weeks. But there was something off about it. Its legs were too long, its back was arched weirdly, as if it was stuck mid-step. I couldn't see its face, just the way its ribs pushed against its skin when it took a breath. I stepped away from the group just a little, squinting up at it. It turned its head towards me, and for a split second, I swore its eyes were wrong. Too round, too dark. But before I could focus, it moved quickly, silent, and disappeared behind the rocks. I don't know why I followed it. Maybe I was bored, maybe I just wanted to get a better look. Either way, I climbed up the ridge, past the little safety markers the guides had set up. I kept thinking I'd just go a few feet, just far enough to see where it went, but by the time I looked back, my class was gone. At first, I wasn't worried. I figured I'd just retrace my steps, but the thing about the desert is that everything looks the same. One red rock blends into the next. The ground stretches endlessly in every direction, and the sun makes you feel like the earth is swallowing you whole. I walked for around an hour, then another and another. My throat got drier and my head started pounding. My water bottle was still on the bus. All I had was a couple of granola bars in my backpack. Thought it wouldn't matter. It did. The first night, I found a small rock formation to sleep under. It barely got blocked by the wind, but it was something. I ate half a granola bar, tried to ignore how dry my tongue felt, and forced myself to sleep. Day 2 was worse. The sun felt like it was pressing down on me, burning my skin raw. My lips cracked, my head felt foggy, like my brain was trying to shut itself off to save energy. I tried to stay in the shade as much as possible, but there wasn't much of it. The desert stretched on forever, and that's when I saw it again. Not the same one, at least, I don't think so, just a shape, standing near a cluster of rocks in the distance. At first, I thought it was a person, maybe a ranger or a hiker, but as I got closer, it crouched, then moved behind the stones, fast, too fast. I called out, but no one answered. That night, I started hearing things, scraping sounds like claws on rock, breathing, slow and rattling, just out of sight. Every time I turned, there was nothing, just the wind, just my own mind playing tricks on me. At least that's what I told myself. On the third day or so, I think, I started seeing them everywhere, not just shapes in the distance, figures, tall and thin, standing against the rock formations like they belonged there. Their limbs were too long, their backs arched, heads tilted like they were listening. I'd see them for just a second before they'd move, disappearing behind boulders and slipping into cracks in the canyon walls. They never got close. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to move. My legs felt weak, my vision blurred. Every step felt heavier than the last. The heat pressed against me like a weight, and my breath came in short gasps. Then, I saw it. It turned a corner, and one of them was just standing there, right beside a tall, thin rock, its body blending into the shadow. It was close enough that I could hear it breathing, raspy and uneven. It tilted its head towards me, and that was enough. My lungs hurt, but I still ran as fast as I ever have, and probably faster than I ever will. I don't remember much after that, just the feeling of the ground under my feet, the pounding of my pulse in my ears. I tripped, fell, got up, kept running. My body felt like it was shutting down, but I didn't stop. Then there were lights, a highway. I didn't know how I got there, but suddenly the asphalt was under my hands, burning hot. I saw a car swerve, someone shouting, and then nothing. I woke up a day later in a hospital. My throat felt like sandpaper, my skin was burnt and peeling, and my whole body ached. For a few minutes, I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what had happened. The last thing I remember was running, the highway, the lights, and them. Dear Snook, congratulations on a very good channel. I've been listening to your videos to go to sleep almost every night after I found your channel. Keep up the good work. My story doesn't really involve any ghosts, cryptids, or demons, but I really believe it is something paranormal. And I'm also curious to know if this happens to anyone else in the world. The story might be a bit elongated, but I'm really like to paint a vivid picture here. This is a story about stairs. Ever since I was 10, I've lived in a tall apartment building, like 5 to 10 stories. Also, most pre or early 2000s apartment buildings in my country don't have elevators, so yeah, you always have to hoof it. The first time this happened, we were living on the 5th floor in an apartment with 6 stories, then rooftop access. I think I was in the 7th or 8th grade. I was coming back from afternoon playtime in the neighborhood. I'd stayed out for quite a while after sundown, so it was very dimly lit outside. And I think even the electricity was out because of the load shedding, a very normal thing in my city. So I was climbing the stairs in the dim light that was coming through these staircase shutters. The building had 2 units per floor. All had the same wooden doors, no nameplates, maybe just different doormats. One of the ways I used to keep track of how many flights I've climbed is on the 4th floor between the 2 doors, somebody had written with a crayon 4th floor. So logically, after seeing that, I should climb 2 more staircases and reach the 5th floor. My home, right? Wrong. While on the first set of stairs, it fell off under my feet. As it was barely lit, I was looking at my feet going up. So after the first set of stairs on the in-between landing, I looked up to expect the 2 doors to the 5th floor. Ours directly in front, and the neighbors next to it. Wrong again. I was standing on the landing that led to the rooftop access. I'd somehow skipped 2 floors. I was creeped out, partially because my neighborhood friends used to say the building was low-key haunted during a few construction workers had died there during construction, and partially because there were no doors at the rooftop access. Just a small concrete shed with 2 doors leading to the roof. It looked normal during the day, but at night it always gave me the creeps. Anyways, I stood there for like a minute in shock. Then I quickly went down to my floor and tried to rationalize it as me just being tired and absent-minded and somehow climbing 2 floors in a haze, even though I had been going up slowly because of the darkness. The same thing happened a few more times in the same building, sometimes 2nd floor to 4th floor, or 3rd floor to 5th floor. And keep in mind, after the first time, I have always kept conscious track of how many flights or floors I'm up. I still didn't tell anyone about this as it just sounded plain stupid. We moved to another building in the neighborhood a couple years later for a bigger apartment. Again, 5th floor on a single unit 5 stories apartment, so we're at the top floor. This also happened in this building. Sometimes 2nd floor to 4th floor, sometimes 3rd floor to rooftop access, always the skipping of 2 floors. Eventually, we moved into apartments with elevators, so I wasn't climbing so many stairs. Fast forward to the present day. I'm a 29-year-old guy now, living in Germany. My apartment is in a pretty old, built early 1900s, 3-story apartment building, and I have lived in one of the Dachgeschoss, which is the attic or apartment, top floor, no rooftop access for the past 3 years. Guess what? This thing still happens now from time to time. I've returned home late, high, drunk, sober in many different states, but I always keep track of how many flights I'm going up on which floor I'm on. But even here, sometimes I skip from the 1st floor to the 3rd floor. I have no explanation for this. I've only shared this experience with my older sister, a close friend, and now you guys. All of them shrugged it off as just my absent-mindedness. What do you think? Has this ever happened to any of you? Regards. Hey Snook, let me begin by telling you I love your videos and it helps me go to sleep. I especially loved your 4chan stories. The Fae Rock People is my favorite. So to begin, this is not my story for the most part, but I also experienced it. This all happened to my aunt and my maternal grandmother. A bit of context to begin with. It's around 2012. My aunt just got divorced and she had the baby alone. She had a job in a different city, 2 hours drive from the city where a majority of our family lives, including me. In between all of this, she also had an accident and broke her leg. A single woman. in a city with no immediate support with a newborn baby. My grandmother decided to move in with her to help her take care of the baby and help her in this difficult time. They rented an apartment in the city. After a while, things began to fall to normalcy. Everything was going fine. When my other aunt, let's call her Aunt B, was going through some trouble, career-related, so she asked to move in with my aunt in the same day. She had 2 rooms that she didn't use, so she accepted her family. Aunt B also had a baby around the same time, so her mother-in-law, her husband, and her baby all moved in with my aunt. Aunt B's mother-in-law was a weird woman. She read a book called Bible, but I've read the Bible before and it didn't look like one. If she had an argument with someone regarding anything, she took passive-aggressive revenge. Like one time when she was confronted, she left the stone turned on. Yes, she sounds like a psycho. Once she had an argument with Auntie B and she lit some appliances in the kitchen ablaze. No one saw her, but no one else was in there to do it, just her. She got the senile old woman pass. She did a lot more than that, all in varying degree of severity. As you can see, a bundle of calamity in a shape of a hag. We also theorized that she dabbled into black magic. She did really weird rituals. She woke up early before sunrise in the morning, untie her hairs, and starts chanting and shaking her head violently. My uncle saw her once and just covered his head and pretended as if he was asleep. I have not heard any Christian rituals as such yet, but she was always accompanied by a pungent smell, like vegetable oil left to go rancid for months. Her son, Auntie B's husband, didn't listen to any accusations regarding his mother. He loved her and didn't believe she could do anything wrong. After a lot of incidents, my aunt asked them to move out. She couldn't put the safety of her baby on the line. They moved out after a few weeks. This is when shit hit the fan. To give you a brief description of the apartment, which will be important later, when you enter from the main door, you reach the living room. The living room has a balcony on the left as you enter. The living room has a wide passage which has a window on the right. On the left is a bedroom which is used as a storeroom, and this is where Aunt B moved in. If you take steps forward, you reach a crossroad, which goes left to a bathroom. Right leads you to a kitchen. A few steps and on the left, you have a second bedroom. My aunts, baby, and grandmother all slept here. It also had a balcony. And in front of you will be the third bedroom. It had a bathroom in it on the right. It was the bathroom used by my auntie and grandmother because it had safety attachments for old people, and my aunt was recovering from the fracture. So, one stormy night, a month after Aunt B left, my grandmother remembered that she left the clothes out to dry earlier on the adjacent balcony and asked my aunt to bring them in as it might rain later. As soon as she opens the door, she was hit with a putrid smell like a carcass was rotting for days somewhere near. This apartment was on the 3rd floor, so this was highly unlikely. She felt a presence with her on the balcony like being watched. She didn't acknowledge it and picked up the clothes and went inside. She didn't say anything about it then. She felt if she talked about it, an evil entity might gain power from it, so she stayed quiet for the night. After a few days, my grandmother was sleeping on the bed at night with the baby and my aunt when she heard a woman weeping in the apartment. She didn't get up, just ignored it for the night, thinking the walls are thin and it might be someone on a floor below or above. There is a concept shadow in our culture. It is not related to shadows, it's just a figure of speech. If it's said you have a light shadow, you're more sensitive and attuned to the supernatural. Likewise, if your shadow is heavy, you are less sensitive. My grandmother and my aunt have light shadows, especially my grandmother. She had a lot of paranormal experiences. In a few days' time, weeping turned into wailing. It was like the woman was in intense pain and wailing like she wanted help. Everyone heard it this time. It was clearly coming from the 3rd bedroom, where Aunt B's mother-in-law lived before they moved. It was guttural. My aunt, thinking someone entered the house, went to check. No one was there. As she came back, it started again. It went on for a long time, and they couldn't move due to the financial issues and had to live through it. The thing, after a while, changed its voice. Sometimes it was a man's voice and sometimes a kid's voice, wailing in the dead of the night like it wanted help. It always stopped as the sun came up. This all went on for a few months. One day, my younger brother, barely 6 months old, started crying. He wouldn't stop crying. My grandmother is very experienced in raising children. She raised and had helped in raising every child in her family, including me. There was no reason for him to cry. She called his doctor and they couldn't tell what was wrong with him either. He cried without stopping for hours. My aunt came from homework early, held my brother in her arms, and started chanting a hymn of God in his ear. He started to struggle as is wanting to get away from her. This happened a few minutes and then he went limp. He was asleep. This was the last straw. You would think she would move, but no, that is for quitters. My aunt is anything but. She took her baby and grandmother back to our city and left them there. She went to the apartment alone this time. She entered the apartment and started shouting obscenities at the entity, that it was her house. She wanted it out. How dare to enter her house and tried attacking her child, and more things that I would not like to say here. This seemed to do the thing. Most of the paranormal activity stopped after this. Most, not all. This is where I come in. When I was 13 and want to spend my summer vacations in our apartment with my younger sister, so the night I got there, I noticed a faint sound of soft chimes near the window in the passage. It was barely audible, but at the same time clear. The chimes were rhythmic, mechanically so. It was constant. After dinner, I asked my aunt about it. At this point in time, I didn't know about the past happenings of this apartment. My aunt and grandmother shared a knowing look and told me it was from the woman upstairs. She wears anklets. It's like a bracelet, but for your ankle. Most of them have small bells on them, so they make really light ringing sounds when the wearer walks. They also told me she also has a young child that runs around the apartment and she chases him. So that was the reason for the ringing. I didn't buy that explanation. It was constant. How can someone walk for hours constantly on end? How can it be so rhythmic without missing a beat? My sister, who came with me, started crying that night. She felt heavy and wasn't able to breathe. To be honest, with the passing of the day, the apartment felt heavier. She was comforted that night, and the next day she went home. The ringing continued every day from the sunset to the morning. They tried to feed me another lie that it might be a bug, like a cricket, but I was still not convinced. So they finally told me that stuff happens around this apartment. I didn't dare go into the room after sunset. The ringing continued for the entire duration of time I was there. Every night like clockwork, the soft, ethereal ringing. There is one more incident that happened there. My uncles and elder sister stayed there when my aunt and grandmother were not there. They also didn't know about the history of the apartment. They were watching TV in the living room. It was late at night. Both of them were pretty invested into whatever they were watching. From the corner of my eye, my sister watched as a shadow figure walked from the kitchen to the bathroom in front of it. She was mortified to say the least. She didn't say anything and suggest my uncle to stay in the living room the rest of the night. He didn't argue. The night went uneventful. In the morning, my sister casually asked my uncle if he saw something in the passage last night. He replied that he saw someone walking from the kitchen to the bathroom. Around the same time, she said the figure from the corner of his eye. They didn't talk any further about it and left the apartment that day. That's all. It's a really long story, and I have more stories about our family and its encounters with the paranormal. It happens with an annoying frequency, to be honest. If you want to hear it, let me know. Keep doing good work, and I love your videos. The first story we have is of the user AFH43. His account was created on May 16th, 2015, but there was no activity until 2016 when he started asking questions about hoodies, sneakers, and music production. Pretty normal if you ask me. However, this would soon change as a year later, in 2017, he made a disturbing post which then led him to descend into an extreme existential crisis and a state of derealization. The theory of quantum immortality has driven me to a state of pure anxiety and terror over the last week. Is it true? Has it been debunked? I can't do this anymore. Now, for those of you who do not know what quantum immortality is, it is basically the idea that you never truly die. Instead, your consciousness continues in a parallel universe where you survive. To dive deeper into this, quantum immortality is a thought experiment derived from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. It suggests that a conscious observer can never truly experience their own death. The idea is based on the notion that, in situations with a non-zero probability of survival, the observer will always find themselves in the branch of reality where they continue to exist. To debunk his theory, a user named John Hazler replied by saying, "Quantum immortality just means that you will never wake up dead. Think about it. The only state you will ever observe yourself to be in is alive. That's only one of the problems with it. Another is that death is not an instantaneous quantum transition. It's a slow, messy process by which the collection of atoms that you are currently pleased to call me becomes so disorganized as to be unable to call themselves anything, and then began to stink. You will likely be there for much of the process and know what is happening. Don't worry, you are in no danger of being forced to live forever against your will." But by then, user AFH43 had already fallen down a deep rabbit hole. with no way out. He went on to make multiple posts in subreddits like r/AskScience and r/AskPhilosophy, searching for some sort of answer. The possibility of quantum immortality is making my life unbearable. Is it a credible theory? It makes complete sense to me, and I can't believe I'm the only one losing my mind over it. I'm freaked out at the possibility of quantum immortality. Is it a credible theory? Scared of quantum immortality, please help me. Why don't you believe in it? The theory of quantum immortality has driven me to a really dark place. I'm living in a state of pure terror. Is there reason not to believe it is true? His paranoia kept on growing, and with each passing day, his anxiety worsened. He became obsessed with the idea that he might never die, trapped in a reality he could not escape. But this fear would soon push him down a very dark path. Later that year, he made a post in r/advice. Existential crisis. It won't stop. I need help. I can't do it anymore. I fear that because I am something in this universe, I will always be alive. Quantum immortality. It makes so much sense to me, and it is ruining my life. What do I do about it? I need to rest. On that post, a user asked him, "Do you also suffer from depersonalization or derealization?" To which he replied by just saying, yes. He had completely lost touch with reality, sinking into thoughts that the human mind isn't meant to comprehend. In another post on r/AskPhilosophy, he opened up a bit about his fears, but for him, this wasn't just a philosophical debate, it was a terrifying possibility, and it was driving him to the edge. That's when he reached his breaking point and made his final post. Quantum immortality. I am killing myself soon. It's too much. I can't do it anymore. Then his account went silent. Most assumed he had gone through with his plan, but in 2019, he suddenly reappeared with an explanation. This time he posted an r/relationship advice, and what he wrote was shocking. While recovering from my psychotic breakdown/suicide attempt, I, 22M, met the only girl, who was 22F, I have ever fallen in love with. Due to my state, it didn't work out. I am considering asking her out again. I am AFH43, a regular feature on those dark/creepy Reddit history threads. I am still alive. It's been a long time since I've logged into this account. I thought it had been long forgotten by everyone. However, after logging a few days ago, I saw that my inbox was full of hundreds of messages from people asking how I am or whether I am even alive. I also saw that my username had been mentioned in a lot of dark/creepy Reddit history Ask Reddit posts. These were extremely hard for me to read because I try not to think about that time in my life. Nearly 3 years ago, I woke up one morning and my mind simply broke. I believed that because of quantum immortality, I would never be able to die, and therefore would experience all of the greatest sufferings possible over and over again for all eternity. I felt there was no escape. It was like a panic attack of the highest intensity that did not end for weeks. For the first time, I understood what Emil Corian meant when he said, "We dread the future only when we are not sure we can ourselves when we want to." Surviving a suicide attempt only worsened my delusions. It was only once I started on my antipsychotic medication during my stay in a psych ward that I began to put the pieces of my life back together and return to normality. It was during the process of getting back on my feet that I met a girl whom I completely fell for. We went on a few dates, we even kissed, but because of what I was going through, I was so nervous around her that it made things a bit awkward, and I was very much emotionally closed up. I think I just tried too hard to make something happen. I just wasn't ready. I was still recovering from a truly traumatic and horrific experience that had completely shattered my mind. I only really started to become myself, to come out of my shell, after we stopped seeing each other, and I began my first relationship with another girl. My girlfriend was a pretty incredible person, and over the last year, with her, I learned to enjoy life, to become free and uninhibited by my anxieties. I became open. I became comfortable with myself and who I was and with the constraints on my existence. I made peace with my experience with my delusions. Today, I am happy and in control of my life. Truly. At first, it seemed like he was finally at peace, accepting reality and ready to move on. But in 2020, he returned. And this time, he was worse than ever. I'm still here. Unfortunately, I'm still here. For a few years now, my life has been pretty good. But at the moment, I'm having an unrelated breakdown and I'm in hospital for another mental reason. I wish I could commit suicide, but I'm still too scared. Maybe it's worth facing it though. I'll have to face death eventually. I'm stuck in hell and my life is f***ed. I might turn to drugs to have some relief from this relentless pain. I just need to sleep and never wake up. Maybe that can be my reality. I just can't do this. I feel alone. I'm terrified and numb at the same time. The default state of my life is suffering. If anyone can help dissuade me from QI, short for quantum immortality, please tell me. But please don't make it worse for me. I'm in agony. Nothingness is a beautiful thing. I just want out. I know it will transfer the pain to other people and that makes me feel horrible. I wish I didn't have these beliefs. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here right now. Since my last post, I've been diagnosed with OCD and that explains a lot. I've been given Seroquel today to help me start thinking rationally. This may sound stupid, but the situation has to do with heartbreak and very specific and absurd triggering factors related to it. Maybe that sounds stupid, but I found love, real love, and now it might be over. Life is suffering. I am suffering. I don't want to be here anymore. I wish this was physical pain instead. I really envy Emil Coran. It was a wonderful fantasy to him at the time because at any moment he knew he could escape and that gave him immense comfort. My mind is broken and I don't think I'll ever be able to fix it. This was the last time anyone heard from him. At first, people assumed he had simply gone off the grid again, maybe this time to heal, to finally break free from the chaos. But everything changed in late 2024 when another user made a post about him in r/askmeanything. And this wasn't just any post. My brother killed himself because of QI. Ask me anything. At first, these posts might seem completely unrelated, but the deeper you read, the more pieces start to fall into place. A few years ago, my brother discovered quantum immortality. If you don't know what that is, quantum immortality is a thought experiment that stems from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. It suggests that if consciousness continues to exist in some form after death, then in some parallel universe, a person could survive events that would typically be fatal. Essentially, it implies that every time a life-threatening situation occurs, there are branches of reality where that person survives, leading to the idea that they could be immortal in those alternate realities. So, here's a scenario. Imagine a football player who is in a crucial game and faces a life-threatening injury during a play. In one universe, the injury is severe and they don't recover, ending their career. However, in another universe, the player miraculously avoids the worst of the injury and continues to play. According to the concept of quantum immortality, the player's consciousness continues in the universe where they survived, while in the other, they are no longer part of the game. This illustrates how they could be considered immortal in the sense that there's always a version of them that continues to exist. Hopefully that makes sense. My brother discovered it and went in extreme panic for weeks and weeks and constantly made posts asking about quantum immortality's flaws and asking people to explain why it's most likely false. However, no matter what people would try to explain to him, he wouldn't seem to listen. He was set. He later made posts claiming he was going to end it because QI was getting too much for him. He survived. A few years passed and we thought he was doing okay, but then he decided to let go again and didn't survive. In his note, he mentioned how QI got to him again and he couldn't take it. I also was never aware he even had a Reddit account when he was posting all those things about QI years ago, but when he passed, I decided to look through his phone and came across his account. Seeing it all the posts he made a few years ago, breaks me. People have even made videos about him. It kills me. It hurts so much. I think about QI a lot myself. If it is real, then he could still be alive in a different reality, but I try not to make myself go crazy over that shit. I hate how a dumb theory actually killed him. Anyways, yeah, ask me anything. Next up is Snapped Fingers, and trust me, he's the most disturbing Reddit user yet. And like AFH43, he shows signs of insanity and schizophrenia, but his story, it's even darker. This account was created on October 27th, 2019, and right off the bat, they started posting. I have no idea about the gender of this user, so I'm just going to refer to them as they. The very first post by this user is disturbing enough to get you invested. It read, "Saw someone get run over by a train and didn't feel anything. Sometime back, I was on my way to work at roughly, edited out I don't want drama, when some kid ran out onto the tracks and got pulverized by the train. Train used the horn a few times, which didn't deter the kid, who realized they wouldn't make it across the tracks way too late. Bystanders started freaking out after the kid got run down. One bystander was irrationally pacing in front of my vehicle, rambling incoherent nonsense. Ambulance arrives quickly and did a quick pickup, and police moved the train, and the world kept on spinning. Throughout the entire process, I felt nothing. I know it's wrong, but I didn't feel anything at all. I had to pretend to end the weird look I was beginning to get from the passenger that was with me. In media, they always say seeing a death is traumatizing and horrifying, but it doesn't make sense. I don't know them or anything else. In the end, I'm confused by the discrepancy. Am I somehow in the wrong for being indifferent in that situation, or is it something else? I know this sounds like some edgy garbage, but it is what it is, and I can't really make this not sound like that. It's clear this user is mentally disturbed, but their posts kept getting stranger and more unsettling. Most were odd but insignificant, until one post changed everything. This is where the real story begins. Seeing and hearing things that aren't there. Lately, I've been seeing and hearing things that aren't there, even more than normal. Most of the time, it's small things like seeing spiders on me in my peripheral vision, only to look at them and they disappear. Other times when I'm in bed, this thing about the thickness of a big fist pops up like a big snake on the side of my bed and looks at me only to dart back down out of sight. Whenever I investigate, nothing is there. Rarely there's full body visual hallucinations. The last one was from a couple years ago when I was taking out the garbage. The silhouette of a child crunched down on all fours and charged at me only to disappear when I looked at it. And before that, there was a large, fleshy, naked, featureless figure slowly walking on all fours in the room down the hall, approximately the average size of a man. All throughout my childhood, I had this thing that would go in my ear. This one used to terrify me, but it's gotten beyond old. Not reacting to it seems to have gotten rid of that one. Rarely, when I try to sleep, a dog that doesn't exist will bark directly in my ear every time I close my eyes. My neighbors do not own a dog, and the sound is way too close for it to be. The trick to getting rid of it is closing one eye at a time to mess it up, and it won't come back for a long time after. Most of my life, I've been seeing and hearing things, but lately, the small ones have been happening more often, mainly the spiders, and the things that pop up on the side of the bed, and small moving shadows. Relatives are super into supernatural, which I do not believe in whatsoever, so they are aware I have seen and heard things. It was just summed up as ghostly mumbo jumbo. I do not inform them about what I see and hear anymore because it's pointless and makes it worse. Burning shit in my house doesn't solve the problem. Talking about them gives them strength, and that strength builds up to bad nights where I'm swarmed. I don't want doctors involved. They've treated me as a science experiment before for other things, medical, and I don't want that again. I do not want medication. I want to remain myself. I've never used illicit drugs, alcohol, smoking, or anything in my life and never intend to. I'm more so curious if anyone has dealt with this before and what they did to get rid of it. At this point, it's clear they're suffering from either schizophrenia or very severe PTSD. Interestingly, the user claims they don't believe in the supernatural, but as their condition worsens, their beliefs take a much darker turn. A few months later, they make the following post, which was deleted right away. However, the content is publicly available on other platforms. It read, "In 2008, I stuck a power drill into my arm. For as long as I can remember, I could see and hear things that weren't real and still do. I usually see them in my peripheral vision, and when I go to look at them, they disappear, but sometimes the big ones don't go away when seen. Sometime back in 2008, I was putting together a shelf when this large black mass came out of nowhere and engulfed my unoccupied arm. I didn't see it till it was right up on me. It scared me so badly, and it was coming up from my arm for my face, so I started jamming the drill into it. On the second strike, I hit my arm and the hallucination dissipated. I had to lie when I went to get it patched up, said I slipped and stuck myself. This behavior clearly points to psychotic tendencies. Many users urged them to seek professional help, but they refused again and again. On this specific post, a user named Opinions Cause Trouble replied by saying, "I wonder if maybe you can see into another dimension. I hope this doesn't cause you any more pain. Why is it when you see more than others, you are an asset to a team, but when you see things other cannot, you are crazy? I hope we find a balance in this world, however you see fit." Snapped Fingers reply is where things get interesting and downright creepy. Funny you'd mention that. There's these spiders that sometimes show up in my peripheral vision, and when they are seen, they vanish. I've come to call them interdimensional spiders. Not sure if that's actually what's going on, but it's something I thought about. The other day, there was some guy on Discord telling me about a dimensional merge. Not sure I buy it, but point being, he said something about reality being weaker in some places, causing stuff like this, and some of the things that appear seem to be curious as they just look at me, then hide. Like when I'm in bed, there's these weird arm things as thick as a fist that pop up in my peripheral at the side of my bed, and when I look at them, they dive back down the side of the bed. Just months ago, this user didn't believe in the supernatural, but now they were starting to believe that they were seeing interdimensional beings and that these visions were more than just a mental illness. By late 2019, they made another post, one even more concerning than the rest. This time, Snapped Fingers wasn't just considering it a possibility, they were convinced. How much of you do interdimensional beings require to leave you alone for good? Blood ritual. Long story short, I see things that don't appear to be actually there, but are. Recently, I've been discussing this matter with some experts on Discord, and apparently, if I give a significant part of myself, as in only from me, to these interdimensional beings, they will finally leave me alone. I've been informed a finger is enough to banish them, but I'm not convinced. I don't even know if they will take it completely or just want it removed as some peace offering. Basically, I don't know if it can be recovered. On top of that, I'm a bit skeptical on whether or not the whole ritual will work in general. Blood magic rituals are something I've never heard of until somewhat recently. Knowing now that this isn't hallucinations like I once thought, but interdimensional beings, I seek others who might have experience with banishing them, and hopefully there's a solution that's a little less extreme. That's right, Snapfingers was now considering a ritual, one that involved sacrificing a part of their body to an interdimensional being, just to be left alone. It was as if they were being manipulated. At first, they refused to believe in the supernatural, but over time, their mindset shifted, and suddenly, they were willing to perform bizarre rituals. Then, a few weeks later, a mysterious user left a comment on one of their posts. "Chief, please check your DMs. Discord, it's mission critical. Snapped Fingers. I'll call you guys later, but I want to know the truth now. No BS, it's super late on my end at the moment, in need to crash. Just to be sure, check your DMs, Chief, and don't worry, everything will make sense. If you're still beyond for a bit, let's continue this, or either on Discord or DMs." At first, it seemed like this user was trying to help Snapped Fingers, but their next post suggested something far more unsettling. Blurry thing by bedside ghost, or no? For context, long story short, I thought these were hallucinations, then interdimensional beings, then hallucinations, but after meds didn't stop it, I'm wondering if it's ghosts. I know how it sounds, I know. Please hear out the whole thing though, please. Most of my life I've been seeing things that weren't there, or so I thought, but I'm running out of explanations. Up until a week or so, it kept getting more and more frequent, but now it kind of slowed. But now there's this thing that pops up on the side of my bed that's really blurry. It's kind of like a snake-like arm that darts up quickly, and when I look at it, it ducks back down. I only see this when in bed. I've seen it a few times before, but since the big guy stopped showing up, this little blurry snake/arm thing has increased its visits. The last time it appeared at the foot of my bed when I was playing something on Steam, the second my eyes moved, it darted down. This was the best look I've had at it because it came up in nearly direct line of sight. It was mostly white with 2 or 3 black splotches on it. Previous appearances were mostly the left side of my bed, by the wall, and once on the same side but by the head of the bed. It just pops up looking at me, I think, then darting back down. The last time I stuck my head right under the bed and saw nothing. I just started addressing it as a friend during its appearances to maybe make peace with it. I'm not scared of this one, just concerned as to the origin of this thing and why it is appearing and such. Has anyone experienced this or know what it is or what it wants? Snapped Fingers was convinced that these interdimensional beings were actually ghosts now. Fast forward a few weeks, Snapped Fingers had lost grip on reality, and things started getting serious. Is there really a hell portal down in the Paris catacombs? I believe that if this portal is actually there, that it might be responsible for the release of swarms of interdimensional beings that spread out worldwide. I've been looking for pictures of this portal, but keep getting images of the rooms flooded with bones inside. I need to find the portal's exact location so I can get an off-the-rails guide down there to shut down this portal. I have put together enough money for a flight and to get equipment that can be flown over there. I haven't quite figured out how to shut down the portal yet, but I'm still working on that matter with a duo that has shut down hell portals before. I've been working on this plan for a while now, and now that I'm so close, there's now being airports shut down because these interdimensional beings released a biblical plague to stop this from happening. I need to find this portal. If you haven't guessed it yet, the plan Snapped Fingers mentioned was actually the same critical mission the mysterious user referenced earlier. This suggests they weren't acting alone, but were being influenced or even controlled by a group feeding into their delusions. Then right before starting their journey, Snapped Fingers made another post to update everyone that this is really happening. Advice for traversing unofficial routes in the Paris catacombs. I am in need of advice for traversing the Paris catacombs unofficial/alternative routes. Below is for context. In a few short days, I will be traveling via an alternative means to Paris to bypass the lockdown. I'm making this trip to shut down the hell portal deep within the Paris catacombs. This portal is responsible for enabling an interdimensional hell incursion into our world. The twisted beings coming from this portal cannot be seen by all, but I can see them and they aren't quite nice. They reach under your door and charge at you, or if they're small, crawl all over you. These beings do not belong in our plane of existence, yet someone erected this portal and we built on top of it. I know how it might sound, but this is real. These beings truly exist. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably be thinking this poster is a nut or two. My current equipment for my journey as of now is 1 big metal industrial flashlight, 20 turpentine holy ritual flasks to banish small entities, 1 sleeping bag, 1 Bible to channel God's divine energy to assist with disarming the portal, 2 cans of beans, 1 buck knife to open the cans, and 1 chalk stick to mark my path. I'm considering a small chainsaw for limb sacrifice if I'm cornered by a large interdimensional being and need a quick out, but I don't have any means of halting the bleeding. I haven't found a way around this yet, but my departure growing near, I'm out of time to figure it out, as my volunteer will be arriving any day now to take me to Paris. Advice on the traversal, or even map of the layers of the catacombs would be tremendously appreciated. For those of you who don't know, the Paris catacombs are a huge underground tunnel system filled with the bones of over 6 million people. In the 18th century, cemeteries in Paris were running out of space, so bodies were moved into these tunnels, which were once old stone mines, and today a small part is open to the public, but the rest is a dark, confusing maze where people can easily get lost. Some explorers have tried to go deeper, but without maps or light, a few never make it back. To connect all of this, we need to refer to a post made by Snapped Fingers prior to starting this trip and mentioning the plan. How do I go about banishing interdimensional beings more effectively? Advice. For context, no, this is not medical. At first, I thought it was hallucinations, but that is not the case. I met some experts on this site that assured me that these are in fact interdimensional beings. With that out of the way, I came to ask about better ways to banish interdimensional beings. Currently, I only know the 2 methods listed below, but they are either require hassling the local church, which kicked me out, see Viridian's method, and making a big mess or putting myself in peril. Viridian's method, currently I'm using the method of mixing turpentine, a bit of my own blood, and holy water. A small glass enough to banish smaller interdimensional beings, but not larger ones. Master G's method. The other method can banish larger interdimensional beings, but at the cost of a part of one's self being sacrificed to the entity. Frankly, this method is too risky. Ended up with a hospital stay over it, among other BS. Sorry, Master G's. I appreciate the advice, though. This ties everything together and answers the lingering questions about what was really happening. Snapfingers had been convinced by other users that they were truly interacting with interdimensional beings and had to venture into the Paris catacombs to banish them and save the world. But in reality, it seems like someone was feeding them this idea, possibly inspired by the movie As Above, So Below, where a group discovers a portal to hell in this very same catacombs. Snapfingers had already started the trip, so a user who was curious for an update left a comment saying, "Hey man, how's the trip going? Also, try not to get lost down there." Snapfingers replied by saying, "Hey, the trip is going mostly okay, but there was some problems at the beginning and during. At the beginning, I got picked up and dropped off at some big building and had to wait a few days in this building in a wall room. It had a pretty sweet TV and a stack of movies I could watch. There was a couple who went through my things and they forbid me keeping my pickaxe and shovel, but they didn't go through my things that much, so I still have my buck knife for opening cans only. Then, when the gentleman that would be escorting me finally came, I brought up that I needed my pickaxe and shovel to shut down the hell portal, but they made me leave my shovel and pickaxe behind because they were worried I'd use them as weapons too. It's been kind of a long trip, but it's mostly been just waiting and watching movies, waiting for the gentleman mentioned previously, or later waiting for a signal from someone else to give us the go-ahead to move, which was almost always at night, which sucks, so I haven't slept very well either. Plus, it's very difficult to hide in a car when interdimensional beings start swarming the car. They made me tell them why I kept hiding, so now all the interdimensional beings are really mad and pressing themselves against the windows sometimes, and small ones are crawling inside the cabin. For context, whenever I tell people in real life about the interdimensional beings, they get really mad and start swarming later on. They already had an idea beforehand of what my mission is, so they were kind and understanding of the situation. We just got across the water today, and I'm in Calais right now, where I will be continuing my journey on my own. Although I didn't think to bring money, so I have to go on foot to Paris. I kind of think this might have been a mistake. While the couple I mentioned before gave me some Doritos for my journey, I realized I didn't account for food for the road. Actually, I have nowhere to go for shelter. I didn't account for money for a hotel or a rental car. I'm beginning to realize I'm screwed, like just now. I don't know what to do. I know I can ask for directions, but I have no refuge from these interdimensional freaks. They're still angry. I know it. And when they get the chance, they start swarming again. Jesus, I think this was a mistake. I don't even have enough money to go back. And if I get caught, I'm fucked. I don't have a way to call those guys back to even try asking for help. I don't know what to do. If I keep going, I'm going to be overtaken. If I get caught traveling illegally, I'm screwed either way. I need to clear my head. I'll post later. This was a deeply unstable individual, traveling to another country for something obscure. It's clear they were confused and not in their right mind. For a while, there were no significant updates. However, soon they made another post, which would change the whole trajectory of their mission. How do you cure possession by interdimensional beings? I am in a Discord group that has been helping me track down the source of an interdimensional incursion by interdimensional beings. These people helped unearth the truth of where these interdimensional beings are coming from, and even helped me get in contact with people to get me to the Paris catacombs and bypass the travel lockdown. Today, I believe they became possessed. And even though I have all the information I need, I know it isn't right to leave them possessed. I know they're possessed because when I told them I hired the men that can get me to the catacombs, and that I'd be leaving with them to shut down the Paris catacombs hell portal, they suddenly became opposed to the entire operation. Even though we all planned it together. I am still in contact with the only member of the Discord who wasn't possessed, but even he is at a loss for how I can help the others. If I fail at shutting down the hell portal, they will be forever possessed, and leaving that risk to chance just isn't right. Please help me unpossess them. It's likely that the people manipulating this user realized they had taken things too far and decided to just back out. At this point, Snapfingers was mentally vulnerable and had fully embraced everything they had been told. But to those who had led them down this path, it was just a game. One they had no problem abandoning. leaving Snapfingers completely alone. Shortly thereafter, Snapfingers made another post, and this time it was clear they were in serious trouble. Traveled by questionable means and didn't account for funds to proceed further. I recently hired a group of gentlemen to take me to Paris so I could shut down the hell portal in the catacombs, and I arrived in Calais, but I need to continue on my own to Paris. My problem is I didn't account for funds for really anything. I didn't consider this part of the journey. I have nowhere to go, and I'm currently posting from inside a dumpster to hide from interdimensional beings. Since there's no light because of how late it is, they're swarming outside my bin. I cannot drag this dumpster with me on my journey as it's obviously too heavy. What should I do for shelter? Snapfingers was now in a pretty bad situation. The user made a short post asking to be invited back to the Discord because they needed to start a car without a key. After that, they made one final post. And since then, no one has heard from them. We'll be entering the catacombs in a few hours. While I found myself in a bit of a pickle the other day, the troubles are finally over. While I am not proud to have done this, I borrowed a vehicle I found and used it to get to Paris. I have left a note inside the vehicle explaining why I took it, and I have also sent the locksmith to put it back where I found it. Right now, I am just gearing up mentally before I go inside the catacombs. As promised, I will post a video of the destruction of the portal, and I will also create a portal destruction tutorial. I need to thank Avril Screeching Artistically for getting me out of the jam I was in by calling a guy who can start a guy without keys. Thank you, Screeching Artistically. You really saved my butt. I also want to give credit to my other Discord friends who helped me uncover all the information that led to the portal's discovery. Once I shut down the portal, you will be free from your possession. Someone has asked about a time frame for when I will post an update. While I don't know how big the catacombs are, my guess is maybe a day or two before my return with videos. I have taken some test footage while I was held up inside a dumpster the other night, and honestly, the quality isn't that great, but it's alright. To make up for it, I will take more footage while I'm down there. One other thing. Someone mentioned that catacomb explorers might attempt to hinder my travel, which absolutely cannot happen. These individuals have an extremely high probability of being possessed due to their extended exposure to living in the portal epicenter, so I will be wary of their threat. Snapfingers was undeniably struggling with very severe mental issues. Every year, over 500,000 people enter the Paris catacombs, and most are arrested since the police patrol the area constantly. However, there are hidden entry points that only a few know about. Dangerous, uncharted passages that can easily become death traps. In the end, there are only two possibilities. Snapfingers was either arrested or lost their life in the catacombs, alone, where their body may never be recovered. Romangarnd. This next post comes from a user named Romangarnd. Unlike the others in this video, this one plays out more like a story, but make no mistake, it's far from normal. And if you've made it this far, you might be hoping for something a little less creepy. Well, it is, but don't let your guard down just yet, because this post, it's something out of this world, literally. An alternate life for 30 years. So I came across Steve Cantwell's experience with salvia on a podcast where he lived an alternate life for 8 years in Texas. He was in Alaska on a salvia trip that lasted about 45 seconds. Meanwhile, in my hunt for such experiences, I came across a gentleman on Reddit who shared his salvia trip at 19, where he lived an alternate life for 30 years. He was kind enough to share the complete trip report, which I have shared below. P.S. The hunt began a couple of weeks ago. Ever since my pet cat died a horrible death, and I've been having dreams forcing me to rethink and question our reality and purpose of existence. I'm in my right frame of mind, but have begun to seriously question life as we know it. Thought you may like his experience. Copy and pasting below as received. Thanks. Before starting, it's important to know what salvia is. It's a strong hallucinogenic plant that causes intense but short-lived trips. Unlike other psychedelics, its effects are unpredictable and often unsettling. This hallucinogen is pretty rare to come by, but you're about to hear the experience of someone who managed to get their hands on it, and let's just say, it didn't go well. This isn't one I've made an actual trip report on, but I have mentioned it in some comments recently. People asking about parallel lives. This is an older experience now that I had many years ago. It's always been a pretty personal thing to me, but it's definitely a parallel life experience. I was 19 when it happened. I'd gotten into this habit of tripping with mirrors at the time, so I was in my bathroom, standing in front of the sink. I had some really bad experiences prior, and honestly my plan was to try and bolt if shit got too strange. I remember with this one in particular, it seemed like nothing was happening. Everything was normal. I leaned in closer to the mirror and the pupil in one of my eyes started growing and didn't stop. It happened fast. There was no escaping it. It pulled me in like a black hole. I remember being stretched into a line and then smashed into a dot and then blinked out into darkness. That's all I really have going into it. Up to this point, this user's experience seems like a typical salvia trip. Strange, but expected. But this is where things take a much darker turn. That blink into darkness faded back out as an opening of my eyes, but I was a different person, living a different life on a whole different world. I was now a dude in my 30s waking up from some kind of overdose. It was very intense on that end of it because I still had some strong memories of this life that you and I are in now. It took me about a year of their time to reorient myself to that reality. I couldn't even talk right for a little while because I was trying to talk like we do. Everybody thought I had brain damage. In that year, I went to sleep every night expecting to wake back up here in my bathroom. I could not accept that it was real, but it just wasn't going away. I could count time down to the second. The memories of this life eventually began to fade though. I didn't have all the little details anymore to try and make sense of it to others. Within that life, I also had some pretty big responsibilities that I had to focus on. I had a family and a house. The whole overdose thing cost me a job, but we were able to turn things around once I put my past behind me. You have to understand that this was all backwards to me. While I was there, my experience was that I had done a drug and experienced years of another life, or ours, and within that life, I did a drug that brought me back. Basically, exactly what I am doing right now. And trying to explain this is what I was doing over there too. When you are in one of these parallels like this, no matter which direction you are heading, they become your base reality for the experience. I was questioning our world, not theirs. Theirs was my actual reality for the time being. So about 30 years later, I was an old man. My kids were grown up and moved out. One of them had asked me to look for something for them in the attic. I went up there and found a box that was very out of place. In it were things from this life we are in now. It was the biggest mindfuck I think I've ever experienced in my life. In that box, though, was a pipe and the same drug I'd overdosed on. Same exact bowl, actually. It was a little burned, but still had a few tokes left. I was just so confused and felt like I was finally close to an answer, so I hit it one more time and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was standing in my bathroom, 19, looking at the mirror. And just like the first transition, I was all f***ed up about it. I still had to reorient, but this was salvia, so there was no waking up from an overdose. It was like 30 years of whatever the hell that was just crammed into my head all of a sudden. I think it was about 4 minutes that had passed in total. Around 3 a.m., I remember just sitting on my bathroom floor, feeling like my head was about to explode, but not in the pounding headache kind of way. I sat there for 4 hours. At one point, I just started crying because I couldn't grasp what had happened. I was still very aware of my wife and kids and wondering if I'd ever see them again. My sister didn't even knock, just slowly opened the door and asked me what was up. She was actually very crucial in helping me reorient to this reality as my name. I tried to explain it to her. My language was a little off again, but not as bad, and she was pretty much kept my family at bay while I sorted everything out. It didn't take me long to put on the mask, but mentally it did take me about another year to let it go. And that's another problem, is the whole mask idea. I don't know how to fully feel like this person that I am, but I'm trying every day. I've seen many other parallels, even on things other than salvia. With salvia, I've left the parallels altogether and experienced core self. This was significant as my longest lived and most detailed parallel experience. You know, this is really why you don't blast a whole bowl of high-level salvia extract by yourself to see something cool. That's not what this is. It is extremely powerful and it will loosen anyone's grip on reality. Best to go in there as a no one. This must be respected as something more than a drug. You have to let go of this illusion if you wish to do salvia properly. Any and all attachments to your name must be left at the door before you cross over. This is how you bypass the parallels and reach the core self. This is how we can remember who we are. The next user on our list was a teenager whose account has since been deleted, but their story remains just as disturbing. This teen was in foster care when they stumbled upon something so unsettling it's almost unbelievable. Around 7 years ago, a post appeared on Reddit. "I think I'm being watched. Is this a camera?" The post had a picture attached to it which at first looked like a normal pen. However, if you look closely enough, you can see a tiny lens at the bottom right. Yes, that's right, this teen was in foster care, and someone had planted a hidden camera in their bathroom. The whole Reddit community was enraged. The user was in a pretty bad spot and didn't know how to handle this. A user named berries_cherries left a comment by saying, "Hey, stop whatever you're doing right now and call the FBI at this number. When you call them, tell them that you found a camera in your foster parents' bathroom and you believe it was set up to record you and any others using the bathroom. Tell them your age and address and ask for an agent to come to the scene. This is not something you want to leave to CPS or the locals at this point. As a cop, I can say that this is number 1, illegal, 2, abusive, 3, you need to get out of the house now. If you have any questions, shoot me a PM." After that, more followed. Even if their intention was to check on you, to make sure you're not in there shooting up heroin or something, placing a spy camera in anyone's bathroom and filming them without consent when privacy is to be expected is illegal. If you're underage and the intent was to peep on you, that's some shit whoever placed it can get in some serious trouble for you. Video voyeurism and production of explicit images of a minor are both serious charges. I would suggest you talk to someone you trust, like a teacher or a counselor, or someone who you know for sure didn't place the camera, and turn it over to the authorities. Chances are whoever placed it is going to be the first person to pop up on that SD card. A lot of people were now invested in this story, so the user decided to drop some info about himself, about how he ended up in this situation. However, this information came with a horrifying update. He wrote, "Okay, I'll write a full update / life story now. My parents died in 2013, sending my brother and me to foster care. For the past 3 to 4 years, I've lived with this guy and his dad who have done some awful / creepy shit. It would feel wrong to exclude the fact that he supported my brother and me for so long that this is unacceptable. A week ago, my brother moved out, leaving me with this guy who just put a camera facing the shower this morning. I posted this thread on my break. Now I'm off work at home after talking with him about it. I don't want to live here anymore. I haven't for a while, but I have no one that will take me in at 16. I've built the last 3 years of my life living here. I have no idea what to do. I've tried calling CPS before. They came and left, and that can't happen again. I'm pretty much alone in this house with no one to talk to or help me. What am I supposed to do?" The user was too afraid to call the cops, fearing that if they confronted their foster parents and the police did nothing, it would only make matters worse for them. However, after getting support from the community, he told his brother, who was out of foster care, the whole thing and decided to finally notify the cops. Then updates followed. Update: CPS has been called. I have a place I can stay at if they take me when they come. Now I play the waiting game. I'll update when they come. However, the next update that they posted changes everything. That's the only reason I was hesitant to call in the first place. I've done it before, and they just left. I can only hope. Now, I know this doesn't make much sense here, but the next post they made connects all the dots about what actually happened. They later posted one last update, and after that, there has been no activity on this account. The post is titled Bathroom Camera Update. While the post itself has been deleted, but reading the comments reveals something terrifying. The police didn't do anything and left the user with the foster parents. For better context, here is what a user named Naked Viking had to say about the situation. "What the fuck, did CPS say anything? Just, well, that's fucked up. Hope you don't get raped / killed. See ya. You need to get the fuck out of there, man." Another user named Curious Kerr made a comment by saying, "Holy shit, that's some intensive expunge shit there. I wonder why they left without OP. Why couldn't they investigate and watch the clips in their FBI van and assess at the spot? OP's guardian will delete any evidence and will get away with it. And what's going to happen with OP? Just wither and die? What the fuck? This is making me livid and making my blood boil. This was the last post made from this account, and no one has heard a single thing from him again. There were multiple people who actually contacted the authorities themselves to help the OP. However, it looks like the foster parents did get him in the end. While the OP never posted anything again, another user named 645-33546 made a post in r/best of legal advice covering this whole thing around the same time, which reveals that the foster actually took away all the electronics from the OP, so he could not get in contact with anyone else. The post read, "What's that? Your proof foster parent is spying on you in the bathroom? Well, we'll leave you here while we look into it. Police. A teenager adopted into foster care came across a device in the bathroom they thought was a camera and brought it up on r/what is this thing? After getting it identified and alerting the appropriate authorities, they then took the camera device and let the teen stay with the foster parent whose house the camera was in. After that, the foster parent then retaliated by confiscating all electronics, save an old phone which was used for the update. It's actually a pretty messed up situation, so I hope this leads to a positive resolution, but given how it's been handled thus far, I'm not feeling optimistic. I also wasn't sure how to go about sharing this non-r/legal advice post in here, since the rules require some element of legal advice, and this is clearly a situation that involves legal advice on top of being pretty crazy. So I'll leave it to the mods on how this goes. Edit. While I was typing up the body, I realized the typo in the title and told myself I'd go back to fix it, and well, yeah, sorry. Edit 2. Clarified that police only took camera, foster parent took other electronics. This post connects all the dots and reveals that the case was buried somehow. Maybe the foster parent pulled some strings so that the OP would be left with no proof about the whole situation.